Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching second and final part of What If Avatar Naruto saved Princess Azula. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
Azula completed the process first and fired a bolt at Chang, who snarled but quickly composed himself and began to follow suit. Chang managed to release his own bolt, which struck Azula's, but the ensuing explosion occurred much closer to Chang than Azula, and he was flung back. Chang groaned, looked up, and barely avoided another lightning bolt before rolling to his feet and firing a bolt at Azula, who jumped over it with a fire-propelled leap and prevented him from producing lightning by forcing him to avoid a blast of fire. They landed on a boulder and began producing more lightning when someone burst out laughing, disrupting their focus. They turned to face Naruto, who was laughing while sitting on the ground and gripping his stomach. Naruto tried to gather his thoughts as he saw the two fighters staring at him. "I apologize. I apologize. Go on," he exclaimed, laughing again. "What's making you laugh?" Azula questioned him impatiently. "No, it's just, the two you look like retards." Naruto collapsed onto his side and burst out laughing once more. Azula and Chang gaped at him in shock for a moment, then glared at him, flushed with shame and rage. "Oh, hurry up. You two are merely shooting tiny lightning bolts while swinging your arms around like monkeys." When he saw them glaring at him, Naruto rolled his eyes and told them, "That's hilarious. What? Shoot lightning normally if you don't want to appear foolish." Really, Naruto was taken aback when Chang threw that lightning bolt. It was not what he had anticipated, and he became even more perplexed when Azula did the same. However, as they continued to do it repeatedly, it soon became humorous. "Normally, we're shooting lightning, idiot. Lightning can only be shot in this manner. It's not funny at all." Chang snarled at him, upset that the boy was making fun of his strongest move. With a feeble laugh, Naruto said, "Stop talking. Is he Chan, or is he not serious?" Azula gave a nod. "Lightning generation is the ultimate technique of firebending." Naruto stopped smiling and said, "Dear Lord. Your ultimate technique is a single bolt of lightning that you can only use by going through big, funny-looking methods," he said, adding that it's sad rather than humorous. "Those funny-looking methods are us separating our yin and yang energies, then releasing the energy from them colliding back together, something I doubt a child like you can even comprehend, much less do." Chang laughed. "I didn't exactly understand what you just said, but aside from the yin energy, nothing you just said has anything to do with lightning," Naruto said after a brief pause. "Actually, I doubt that what you just said is even conceivable." Chang sneered after the two firebenders gave him blank blinks. "All right. For example, a boy tells me that the way we employ a method that only grandmasters know is incorrect." Naruto gave him a disbelieving glance. "Grandmasters? For that? The firebenders here are terrible, I swear. In my time, lightning is merely a mid-level skill." Azula gaped at him as Chang scowled, not understanding what he meant by "my time, mid-level." She gave a little squeak. "Perhaps not even that," shrugged Naruto. "A group of firebenders that I know are experts at bending lightning. There are many firebenders who are more adept at lightning than fire. Hell, I'm more adept at lightning than fire. How is that even possible? Hellfire is what you use. It's Hellfire's weakest form. I've had arguments where that has always been used against me." He started up another bolt of lightning, attracting the attention of the two teenagers, and Chang decided they were both insane after glancing at the boy who was sprouting nonsense and the girl who was obviously buying it. Azula watched Chang shoot the bolt at Naruto as she got ready to leap behind the boulder. Being closer to Chang and unprepared for the attack, Naruto knew he couldn't avoid it, but he didn't have to. With ease, he backhanded the bolt away, causing it to strike one of the boulders to his left. Chang stood staring at him, his mouth agape, and Azula was similarly stunned, trying to take in what she had just seen. Lightning, the most potent firebending technique, which could not be defended against other than by moving out of the way or placing something between you and it, was swatted aside like a spider fly. Azula began, "So, after a pause, how does lightning happen?" It would be equivalent to acknowledging that all known firebending experts and masters, both past and present, were mistaken to ask this child to explain a different method of creating lightning. "Payback is a bitch." Naruto moaned at having to repeat something else. He wasn't a teacher, damn it. He looked absently at Chang and slowly gave the man a sly smile that made his spine tingle. "There are 3 methods of lightning bending." "There are 3 methods, dear Agni. It's the only method that uses an internal source of lightning," Naruto said, pointing to Chang with his finger. "The first method is to manipulate the bioelectricity in the body. Rado. Rakurai, lightning art. Thunderbolt." A bolt of lightning shot from his finger and passed directly in front of the man's head, but instead of hitting the ground and stopping there, it continued to cut through the ground, craving a groove all the way up the canyon wall. It was the strongest lightning bolt Azula had ever seen, and it wasn't even forked, which may have contributed to its strength. A typical lightning bolt concentrated into a single, concentrated beam. Raku, whatever he called it, was a truly remarkable technique. Rado. Lightning surge wave, or Ryadoha, but it was a joke in comparison to that. When he looked over, he saw that balls of lightning were approaching him, and Chang frantically dodged the balls, bolts, and waves as Chang barely jumped out of the way of the lightning wave. Yes, a wave, not a bolt. As a child, Azula played with the turtle ducks in the palace pond, and she could tell that Naruto wasn't really trying to hit Chang in this scene. With a contented smile, Naruto paused to listen to Chang's terrified cries before continuing, saying, "The second method is to gather and manipulate the electricity that's in the air." As lightning began to form a ball of lightning bigger than his head, Naruto held out his hand. Rado. Ikazuki Shushkiden Thunder Crash Bomb. The lightning struck the wall, causing an explosion that sent Chang flying backwards, bouncing on the ground multiple times before sliding to a stop. He shakily picked himself up, hurt but fortunately spared from electrocution by the wall. Desperate and acting without thinking, he created a wall of fire in the hopes that it would do something. "Are you kidding me?" he asked himself in his mind as he rolled out of the way of a lightning whip. He looked up and saw Naruto apparently making the motion for lightning generation, with lightning trailing from his hands, but then he raised his hand above his hand. Chang scowled in bewilderment before realizing what he was doing. Azula watched as Chang barely avoided the whips, even taking a few blows, but he appeared unharmed despite the agonized cries and minor burns. So not only can he control the lightning's form, he can also control the lightning's power, Azula said. Perhaps staying with him for a while would be worthwhile because he's actually bending lightning rather than just shooting it. "Hey, Haim, Chan." Azula's attention was on Naruto. "Recall how I mentioned that heat can be produced by wind friction?" Yeah." Azula lagged behind, uncertain of his next move. "Well, heat isn't the only thing friction creates." The tiny tornado crackled with electricity as wind began to swirl around Naruto's fist. He was not going to do what she believed him to be, and Azula shook her head slowly in shock. All he did was clench his fist, and several lightning bolts flew forward from the wind. The final method is to use the wind to generate enough friction to create a static charge. Moving the hell out of the way was Chang's only option once more. It was time to put an end to this, Naruto sighed. At first, it was entertaining, but it soon turned into a pitiful situation, and he began to feel like a bully. With his arm drawn back and static electricity gathered around his fist, he sped forward at a breakneck pace. "Rado. Raimaiken Thunder Fist." Chang screamed silently in agony as he was electrocuted, then passed out, as Naruto's electrified fist struck his face and sent him flying back. "I hope you enjoyed that because that was the last thing I'm explaining, for the rest of the week," Naruto said, shaking his head at the defeated rebel leader before turning to face Azula. Azula's eyes were bugged out as she squeaked, "You bent lightning, with airbending. How difficult is it to remember that?" Naruto emphasized, "Windbending." Azula gave a stupid nod. "All right, bending in the wind." As she passed out, her eyes rolled back into her head. "You bent lightning with windbending. She's going to feel that when she wakes up." Naruto winced as she fell off the boulder and hit the ground. He went over and picked her up piggyback style. "Well, she can't tell me I can't carry her now." He glanced at the battered soldiers again before running away. "Not for the final time." "Why not?" "Because I don't want to." "But, no, I have to learn proper lightning bending." "You don't have to learn, you want to." "Oh no, I have to learn," Azula said, shaking her head. "I can't continue intentionally using that method incorrectly. It looks silly, as you yourself stated." Naruto nodded and laughed to himself, saying, "Yeah, it does. Exactly. Additionally, I would have an advantage over my pursuers if I learned lightning bending." To emphasize his point, Naruto punched the air several times. "If any pursuers come, I'll kick their ass." "And what would happen if you weren't present?" Azula asked. "Why would I not be present? Just instruct me." She became impatient and yelled at him. With an awkward neck rub, Naruto moaned, "I don't think I'm the right person to teach you." "Why?" "Because the only way I know how to teach you is the way I learned, and as tempting as it is, I wouldn't feel right beating you into the ground," he said, which caused Azula to stop. "I apologize." Naruto sounded resentful as he stated, "My grandma, the evil Oni Baba, had me trained with the idea that the best way of learning a technique was by experiencing it, which meant I got the crap kicked out of me every day. This was one of her solutions to the issue of my limited training time. He began to slump slightly as he spoke, adding, that and all of those intense, bizarre, and painful training methods. She and all of my bending masters put me through. Just about every technique I know I learned by getting one safe demonstration before it got used on me repeatedly until I could counter it and perform it. Whoa, Azula blinked. It looks like your grandmother is a little too extreme. With a twitching eye, Naruto turned to face her. A little? He began to stalk her, saying, you don't know. Imagine spending a month alone, just the clothes on your back, in the middle of a blizzard. Imagine spending a month stranded in the desert with only a small water canteen. Or being thrown off a cliff 3 times to learn how to fly. Heaving a boulder over your head while learning to walk on water. Azula had to back away because he was now in her face with a crazy expression in his eyes. Being chained inside a burning building taught me how to burn through metal. It's difficult enough to keep a candle burning for a full day in normal weather, but it's nearly impossible in a snowstorm. Blocking lightning with a lightning rod fastened to your back, which will still strike you even if you attempt to avoid it. Making an energy shield that is resistant to breaking under the impact of multiple explosive notes. You crazy old hag, I almost died. Naruto let out a startled cry into the air. What the hell kind of training is that? It sounds more like some sick form of torture, Azula said, looking at him with a drop of perspiration and a slightly blue face. Naruto shook his head and turned to face her, saying, you know I still haven't finished that candle exercise yet. In any case, do you see why you wouldn't want to train under me? I admit, I'm a lot more hesitant than I was before. Azula continued, but it's not like I have any other options. With a sigh, Naruto resumed his stroll. Azula followed him until she was standing next to him. You don't realize how important this is. It was claimed that lightning bending was not possible. We could only guide and release lightning, not control it like you can. You're unable to control your lightning? Asked Naruto, raising an eyebrow. No, that was dangerous, Naruto thought, and he said, you should really stop using lightning then. If left unchecked, it could turn against you and even kill you. And that's why you should teach me, Azula said, winced, and paled slightly. Since lightning is my trump card, I can't guarantee that I'll do that. I might need to use it at some point. Alright, Naruto sighed. I might impart some knowledge to you. Okay, just stop using lighting until then. Azula nodded, understanding that would be the best she could get out of him for the time being. In the brief time she had spent with the boy, she had discovered a number of things that annoyed her, but the thing she detested most about Naruto was that he wasn't scared of her. They both knew that he was much stronger than her, so using force was out, as was using her title as princess, which didn't have as much weight with the word fugitive in front of it. Despite this, Azula felt that he wouldn't give a damn about such a thing. She had other ways of manipulating him, such as using her natural charm, but he was negating that with his gift of getting on her nerves and making her snap at him, which had already happened multiple times today. She had seen her ability to control her anger waning, but that seemed to be the only time he was truly afraid of her, when she was truly furious. I'm glad I'm not the only one hungry, Azula said, blushing and frowning down at her growling stomach after another hour of walking. She then looked at Naruto, who was staring back at her with squinted eyes for a few moments before smiling. Before starting to eat from his pack, he cheerfully declared, time for a ramen break. Azula responded, no, I'm tired of ramen. Are you sick of ramen? You don't know good food when you taste it, Naruto said, scowling at her. Rolling her eyes, Azula said, let's just have something else. Well, the other only thing I have to eat are ration bars. Those things tasted like wood, Azula said with a grimace. I wonder if there is a city nearby? Naruto noticed a big rectangular object in front of him when he looked up from his bag. What is that? While Naruto went to another side, Azula looked at what he was referring to and nearly laughed at her good fortune. It's a notice board, which means there is a city nearby. She pointed to the west and said, just a couple of miles that way. And luckiest they're having their Fire Day festival today, so we'll be able to blend in easier. Hurry up. As he started to follow her, Naruto noticed something on the board and said, hey, look at this, it's a picture of me. What? Azula whirled around. Yes, look, there's also one of you. Azula snatched it from the board and examined it, gritting her teeth and glaring as she read it, before burning it to a crisp, shocking Naruto. What's wrong with you? Did you not like your photo? She told him, you idiot, those are wanted posters. Wah. Really? Is there a bounty on my head, then? Naruto turned back to his poster then smiled. Hell yeah. Datebao, I'm fantastic. I have a bounty even though I have only been here a week. Are you thrilled about this? Azula questioned with disbelief. Yes, without a doubt. What is it saying? I am unable to read it. Azula gave him a look and said, "You're not literate?" "I can read, but I don't know how to read Mandarin," Naruto said, blushing. "I can't read the language, but I can speak it." "You're multilingual?" Her tone was one of disbelief as she asked. "Of course," replied Naruto, "I am the Avatar, and I must speak the language of every land if I am to restore harmony to the world. I currently speak Mandarin, Japanese, and a little bit of English that I learned from my friend Temujin." Azula simply acknowledged the new information she had learned about the future with a small sound. So each land has its own language. This seemed strange to her because, at the moment, everyone on the planet speaks the same language. The only distinction is that people from different countries have different accents. She read aloud from the poster, "Wanted, Crimson Avatar. Crimes include attacking military personnel, helping the runaway Princess Azula, and seriously damaging Wang Jinhuo. Is a skilled airbender who can bend red wind and a master firebender who can bend black and red flames. Has the capacity to make duplicates of himself as well. Criminal is very dangerous. How did they learn about your clone technique?" Azula scowled. "The Crimson Avatar title and your identity as the Avatar should be kept a secret from the military." She remained silent for a while before continuing. "Were they apprehended or did they send this out themselves? Only those Black Fire Order soldiers would know that. Since the Fire Lord's seal isn't present, that could be the case." As he removed his bounty poster, the young time traveler said, "Ah, who cares? It's out and there's nothing we can do about that." Naruto tucked the poster into his shirt and began to leave, saying, "Now let's go into town and get something to eat. All we can do now is not get captured." Such a simple, easygoing kid. "It's annoying yet almost amusing," Azula said, looking at his smiling face before shaking her head with a slight smile. "Crimson Avatar? Really? I know a lot of officers lie to hide their incompetence, but Wong couldn't come up with something more believable than this?" Mai asked, gazing down at the wanted poster. As he threw bread to the turtle ducks, Zuko grunted, "I'm not sure. I only have Wong's account of what transpired in a list of inmates he says are members of the Black Fire Order." "Are they not a myth?" Mai inquired. Zuko responded, "Supposedly. All of those inmates admitted to being rebels but denied being part of the Black Fire. And a few of them even attested to the existence of this child." "Oh, hurry up. A child with the ability to create copies of himself, bend red wind, and bend black and red fire. The photo doesn't even appear realistic, yellow hair and whisker lines, for Agni's sake. While you're at it, why not add wings?" Mai said. Zuko gave a snort. "Now, where is Wong?" Mai inquired. "He's still after Azula and the prestige he'll gain for capturing her," the Fire Lord sneered. "Additionally, several of the more ambitious officers are out participating in the same activity. Like Aang was months ago, Azula has grown to be a huge prize to them." "What was the council's response to this?" Mai asked. "They're upset that Wong sent these out without first checking with us," Zuko said, tossing another piece of bread into the pond. "With these, he not only made Azula's escape public, but he also gives the impression that she has an avatar working for her, as if that won't trigger any panic. Is that something that worries them?" Mai sounded doubtful. "Well, I am," acknowledged Zuko. "They're more worried about how foolish we'll sound by suggesting there's another avatar." "A second avatar?" Mai asked, glancing down at the poster once more. "Yes, that does sound foolish." Gazing up at the tree, Zuko reclined in the grass and said, "I just want this whole Azula thing finished soon, but knowing my sister that's not going to happen. Who knows, if this kid is real then he should be easy to spot with features like his," Mai replied. The cook set down 2 trays of food and said, "Here are your orders, miss." A young girl with brown hair picked them up and said, "Thanks." "Here you go, sis," she said as she approached a table and placed one of the trays in front of the older girl seated across from her. Taking a bite out of her roast duck, Azula saw Naruto staring at her and rolled her eyes, saying, "You don't have to call me that all the time." "What? Is that a sufficient disguise? You didn't really do much to change your appearance," Naruto inquired. Naruto looked down at his henge, a long, dark, brown, haired, gold-eyed girl his age dressed in a white long-sleeved shirt, a sleeveless dark red dress, maroon pants, and sandals. "Well, I can't do anything like change my gender," Naruto said, "or anything drastic like that without being permanent or drawing attention to myself, neither of which I want." Naruto responded, "Okay," acknowledging her point, but adding, "But still, all you did was let your hair down and take my only pair of sunglasses." He pouted, which, as a girl, was adorable. "One small accessory and I'm completely unrecognizable," Azula said, grinning as she looked at her reflection in her glass of juice. "They look better and are less noticeable than a cloak." With a sigh, Naruto began eating her Komodo sausage. Not bad. Even so, it's not ramen. Azula rolled her eyes and ate another piece of roast duck, listening to a few men converse. It's true. The whole town is gone. What do you mean by gone? Was it destroyed? No, it vanished. It is no longer there. When I arrived, it was just a big plot of land. There were no buildings or people, only these strange square ditches that appeared to have been scooped out of the earth. Scoff. I don't buy it. You probably got lost and went to the wrong place. No, hold on. I've heard that another town nearby experienced the same thing. Gone, as though it had never been there. Come on, how can a whole town vanish so quickly? Maybe the spirits are angry about the war and are dragging the Fire Nation to the spirit world town by town. Why would they attack us after the war ended rather than while it was still going on? After they had finished their meal, Azula grabbed Naruto and informed her that they were going shopping, and she shook her head and stopped listening to their nonsense. Hey, just because I look a girl doesn't mean I like to go clothes shopping. When he sealed the items in some scrolls, Azula began to drag him back to buy more, but Naruto reminded her that he already had some supplies and that they should save their money. Azula agreed, remembering that she was no longer wealthy, and she dragged him around town to get tents, a sleeping bag for herself, and as much food and water as she thought they could carry. He was surprised that Azula didn't take him to any clothing stores. Naruto was watching Azula from behind as she studied a few maps. What's that a map of? Azula looked at her and said, the Fire Nation. Where is your master? She stepped aside to give him a better view. Before shrugging, Naruto searched the map with her finger and said, I don't know. Where are we? Yeah, I'm not very good at reading maps, so, she said, moving her finger further to a southern island. So you don't know? Azula deadpanned. With a sheepish laugh, Naruto looked at another map and asked, what is this a map of? After giving it a quick glance, Azula said, it's a world map. Really? Naruto blinked. He glanced back at the map and said, well, if this is the Fire Nation, then this, pointing to the enormous, light green continent. I remember that the Earth Kingdom and the Water Tribes are here in the North and South Poles. I thought the Air Temples were supposed to be in the corners of the world. When Azula noticed that Naruto was searching the map's actual corners for the temples, she started to perspire. It's strange that places so far apart are regarded as belonging to the same country, she said, referring to the Water Tribes and Air Nomads. I didn't even know people could live in the North and South Pole, she said, shaking her head and pointing to her. That's correct, Azula snorted. Like the barbarians they reside in that frozen wasteland. What made you want to conquer a frozen wasteland? She inquired. When she asked her father the same question years ago, he responded, if we didn't capture it, it would be a place where fugitives could be free to hide out and where a resistance could gather. Plus the Northern Water Tribe would serve as a great location for a prison for Earthbenders and the Southern Water Tribe a prison for Firebenders. Naruto smiled briefly before turning away from her, saying, I see. Wow, that's evil that she wants to turn an entire civilization into a couple of prisons. There are no longer any residents there? Azula inquired. With a shrug, Naruto said, not that I know of. After glancing down at the world map, Azula said, so you couldn't tell this was a map of the world? It was more of a statement than a question, but after considering her options, she asked it anyway. You said the four nations don't exist in your time anymore. How did they fare? She had been thinking about it non-stop ever since he told her, and even though she didn't want to know, she reasoned that if the worst happened, she would be able to stop it with knowledge. Sheepishly, Naruto rubbed her neck and said, history isn't my strong suit either. With a frustrated sigh, Azula said, so you don't know. While she paused before speaking, Naruto shook her head and said, but even if I did, I don't think it would be a good idea to tell you. I shouldn't have even mentioned to you that the four countries were no longer in existence. Azula's forehead wrinkled. Why not? Because telling you could change events that could affect the time stream and alter the future. Naruto clarified for her. At least that's what happens in movies and manga. I think the presence of you and your other future pals are already doing that, Azula replied. Maybe they are, but I'm not. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. What do you want me to do? Naruto cried out. A white humanoid tiger with blue eyes and black stripes, dressed in black pants and a sleeveless green Chinese shirt, spoke, we need you to travel back in time and retrieve the people there who are from this era. Incredulous, Naruto gazed at the spirits assembled before him, some of whom were from his previous incarnations. Why must I do that? I believed that the Avatar's role was to keep the world in balance, not to play time cop. With a more humanoid appearance, a female spirit responded, Their presence in the past is starting to cause shifts in the space time continuum that's affecting the world. Again, why must I do that? Naruto scowled at them. If they're interfering with his time, why doesn't the avatar who is already there send them back? An elderly bald man in orange robes with an arrow tattoo on his head explained, well, most of those people there are from the elemental nations. But the main reason we're asking you is because according to the events of time it was Avatar Naruto Uzumaki who brought these people their proper places. I'm not going. I don't care. Naruto obstinately crossed his arms. Putting his hands on the young boy's shoulders, a man with long, spiky gray hair asked, what are you complaining about? We're telling you to do something that you will undoubtedly do. You already know that you will succeed, so you don't need to worry. At that, Naruto blinked, understanding that he had a point, that if he went, he would return, and that he would not have to worry about whether he would succeed or fail, but still. And, the brunette said, I can tell you that the person who teaches you earthbending happens to be one of these people. Naruto was now bouncing on his toes, looking back at his past with excitement, and any reservations he had vanished with that statement. So when do I leave? Naruto asked nervously. Azula deadpanned, you don't even know how long you'll be gone. That's what convinced you to go back 500 years in time. An earthbending master. They didn't tell you whether you would return in perfect condition after spending 10 or 20 years here. What does that mean to you? Shrugging, Azula said, oh, nothing. She remarked naively, people can survive losing an arm, a foot, or some other crippling injuries. I'm not worried, Naruto said, fading slightly before shaking her head to get rid of any negative thoughts. Even though spirits can be heartless, my previous lives weren't. If that were the case, they wouldn't have sent me here. You have no idea how difficult it has been for me to locate a master earthbender who isn't going to try to murder me right away, Naruto added. Raising an eyebrow, Azula said, kill you at sight? I'm going to assume that you're at war and that the enemy is trying to kill the avatar. You need to learn the other elements so that you can stop them. Although we don't have a good relationship with Iwa, the village where the majority of earthbenders in the elemental nations reside, Naruto stated, no, the last war ended before I was born. The fact that I resemble my father doesn't help either. What's wrong with having your father's appearance? Naruto's expression changed from a cocky smirk to a proud grin. My dad was what you may call a badass during that war. Badass? What? Azula repeated. He disregarded his superiors? No, he wasn't a bad boy, he was a badass. Badass means awesome. Naruto elaborated. He was so awesome, took out so many ninja, there was a flea on sight order placed on him. A flea on sight order? Azula said, dropping the maps she was holding. She gaped in disbelief as she looked at Naruto. During the 100-year conflict, not even the Avatar had been considered dangerous enough to merit such an order. What sort of person was his father? The Earth Kingdom was the largest landmass he had ever seen on a world map, and Naruto wondered how the Fire Nation had nearly conquered a country of that size when it was so much larger. He wondered what exactly happened to cause it to split into pieces, but all he knew was that there had been a war so devastating that it cracked and shifted the land into the 5 continents that exist in his time. He didn't know who fought the war or how long it lasted, but he did know that it claimed the lives of 6 avatars, and they didn't like to discuss it. One of the greatest benefits of being the avatar for Naruto, who had no friends growing up, was the ability to communicate with his former selves. It was like making 1,000 new friends, with whom he chatted whenever he felt lonely, which was frequently, and he learned a lot about the world from them, including the former nations, from the 4 that are now in existence to the time when there was only 1. They paid for the maps and then went looking for an inn down the road. You mentioned that your grandmother and this arrow, Senin individual trained you, didn't you? Azula inquired. I was trained by lots of people, but they were the main 2. You weren't even trained by your father. You must have learned something from such a strong man, she asked. No, he died the night I was born, Naruto said, sadly shaking her head. In actuality, I have spent my entire life as an orphan. That caught the Fire Princess off guard, and all she could say was, oh. As they walked on, an awkward silence descended. Naruto wanted to break the silence after they had been silent for a while, so he grabbed her arm and pulled Azula after, she, saying, hey, let's go here. They were passing a zoo. Azula frowned as she glanced at the zoo sign and asked, what makes you want to visit the zoo? From the moment I got here I have been on the run, hiding out and fighting soldiers and rebels. Naruto clarified. I want to do something fun. How about the zoo? With a tone that made it clear she didn't want to leave, Azula said. Yes. I would like to see the appearance of bears 500 years ago. Dryly, Azula said, I'm sure they look the same now as they do in your time. Holy shit. There's a duckbill on that bear's face, Naruto cried out. As Naruto attempted to get Azula to look at the freaky duck bear, she pinched the bridge of her nose. It's called a platypus bear. She hissed at him, now shut up and get off the railing, people are staring. Wow, a platypus bear. My friends won't believe this unless I get pictures. Naruto pulled out a camera and took a picture. Gazing at the camera, Azula asked, what is that? Looking down at the camera, Naruto blinked foolishly. This is a camera, a piece of future technology, she said, looking back up with a smile. She pointed the camera at Azula and snapped a picture, and although the flash didn't blind her due to the sunglasses, it still startled her a little. Naruto gave her the picture, and she examined it. It looked more realistic than any portrait she had ever seen, and it was all the more impressive because it only took a moment to happen. Do you have any more stuff from the future? Oh yeah, plenty of stuff including 2 other cameras, but without a place to get the film developed they're pretty much worthless here, Naruto replied. Right. Azula turned and left, saying, you saw your bear, now let's go find an inn. She was staring at Naruto, but she had no idea what movie he was referring to or what he was talking about. No. We still haven't seen the entire zoo yet, Naruto complained as she took hold of her arm. Unfortunately, I want to go lie on a real mattress in a bed. Azula attempted to free her arm from Naruto's hold, but Naruto resisted. You can do that later, it's not even that late. Naruto pulled the girl after her, and they walked around the zoo, Naruto taking pictures of each animal. They said, today is about fun, something that you are in dire need of, now come on. They discovered a small shot put competition after the zoo, where the winner would receive 40 silver pieces for throwing the mail ball the farthest. 8 men entered the competition, all of whom threw the ball between 12 and 16 meters. Naruto had snorted and asserted that he was capable of more. The crowd laughed as the men sneered or glared at Naruto, and one of them held out the ball, silently challenging him, who accepted without hesitation. It was amusing to watch the expressions on everyone's faces when they witnessed a 13-year-old girl throw the ball 23 meters. The crowd cheered, and she walked away in despair, with Azula half-heartedly comforting her. Naruto was beaming with victory when a large, bear-like man stepped up and threw it 25 meters. Azula had always hated this story, especially since it was true, which meant that Azula was actually related to Azalea. They then went to see a play called Azalea, Peace Dreamer, a Fire Nation tragedy about a princess who lived during a civil war and the struggles she had trying to persuade her family and the nobles to put an end to the fighting and reach an agreement with the commoners they were at war with, but they ignored her and rejected her attempts to befriend the rebels. The most frustrating part of this story was when Azalea was accidentally mortally wounded by her father during the big final battle when she jumped in and saved the rebel leader by taking the fatal shot meant for him. The Fire Lord and the rebel leader honored her death by making a truce, thus uniting the Fire Nation. Azalea was such a weak and pathetic excuse for a princess, it was shameful. Azula herself would never try to understand the rebels. Why should she? She was royalty, they were peasants, and it was either obey her or perish. Fixing a glare at the person who had dragged her to this dumb play, Azula nearly passed out when she saw Naruto sleeping soundly, snoring, and drooling. They had only been in the play for 20 minutes. It seems that the only thing Naruto had listened to when he had heard about the play was that it was set during a war, which meant that there would be a lot of action, but in reality, there was very little action, and the majority of it was in the second act. As a fire formed in her hand, her eye began to twitch. A fire raged behind them as Azula walked calmly humming a tune as Naruto ran out of the theater, holding a burnt bottom, followed by a panicked crowd. As Naruto twisted and jerked her around among the other people dancing to the music of the nearby band, Azula scowled. Through the sunglasses, Azula had found it more difficult to see as it had grown darker. She grumbled, and Naruto replied, "They're sunglasses, they meant to block out light." As a result, she had demanded that they head straight to an inn. After 2 minutes of searching, Naruto heard music and started to walk in its direction. When he saw the dancing people, he pulled her out to dance in spite of her objections. Dancing was prohibited for a reason. Stupid Zuzu. Naruto jumped on the other bed and let go of his hinge as Azula groaned and fell back onto the bed in their inn room. What a day. You chose a fantastic town to visit. How fortunate they were to have a festival today. Azula grunted, worn out from the activities of the day, in contrast to the boundless ball of energy 5 feet away from her. Naruto gave the weary girl a smile and said, "Thank you. It's been a long time since I had a day of pure fun." Gazing up at the blonde, Azula said, "What's the reason for your gratitude? I was pulled to all of those locations by you." Naruto acknowledged, "Yeah," but added, "But you told me what each of those animals were." Azula thought irritably, That's because you were being loud and I didn't want people to stare. And you suggested we go see that play, even though it was so boring. Naruto continued. No, I wanted to stop walking, so I said, let's see a play. I told you it was dumb, so I didn't say, let's see that play. Naruto sighed. I thought you said that because there wasn't any romance or singing or other girly stuff like that. Azula would have snorted if she had less class. Please. I'm not interested in such things. Is that correct? You know, if it weren't for the fact that I was hanged as a girl, I'd say we went on a date today, Naruto said. He looked up thoughtfully. With a slight flush on her cheeks, Azula sat up straight and looked at Naruto in confusion. Have you gone crazy? What was the date like? Think about it. We ate dinner, hung out, played games, and went to a play. Azula listened to Naruto break down their day, which did sound like a date, much to her embarrassment and irritation. Yeah, but it wasn't. She stated in a tone that said don't think otherwise. It was just friends spending the day with each other, nothing more. She noticed Naruto grinning at her. What are you smiling about? With an increasingly radiant smile, he said, that's the first time you've admitted that I'm your friend. As she stood up to change into her pajamas, Azula shrugged. So, it's not a big deal. It was a big deal. She had said that without giving it much thought. She had decided to cut off all of her friends after the Mai and Ty Lee incident, but she had gone too far with that plan when she exiled everyone around her because she was afraid of their untrustworthy behavior, which ironically led to her downfall. She has come to terms with the fact that she will have to work with people who might not be entirely loyal to her because, despite the risks, a ruler needs subjects, and that's all they are. Subjects, not friends. She didn't trust anyone, and friendship meant trust. The festival had ended hours earlier, and the majority of people had gone inside to rest. The only people outside were drunks who had passed out in the street and a few city guards on patrol. The ground began to tremble as 3 guards were making their way down a row of homes. It's an earthquake, one of them called. Not an earthquake, please. Look, the second guard gestured to a house that was sinking into the ground behind them. They watched in disbelief as each house sank into the ground one after another while they heard the cries of the occupants, until the earth engulfed them as well. Buildings were sinking underground all around the town, and those who were in a desperate situation leapt out of windows to avoid being buried. When several buildings in the area began to sink, Azula woke up to the sound and went to look out the window, wondering what was going on as she saw huge dust clouds in the distance. What in the world? Naruto. With a groan, the boy turned his back on her. Are you really sleeping through this? Azula asked, her eye twitching. She questioned the boy who was snoring a little. Awakened by his EDS, early danger sensor, Naruto leapt to his feet just before the room began to tremble. What is this? Naruto yelled. Gazing out the window at the approaching ground, Azula said, the inn is sinking. What? Naruto hurried over to gaze out the window. She placed a foot on the windowsill, ready to jump, and said, we have to get out here now. No. Naruto sobbed, putting his arms around her waist and launching himself into the air because he felt uneasy about landing on the ground. Naruto and Azula gazed at the scene below while suspended high in the sky. What on earth is happening? As the final structure vanished, Naruto cried out, where has the town gone? What the hell just happened? Naruto asked, gazing at the desolate area where a town had once stood only 5 minutes before. Azula looked down at the scene, recalling the discussion she had heard earlier. Yes, the entire town has left. What do you mean by, gone? Was it destroyed? No, it vanished. It is no longer there. When I arrived, it was just a big plot of land. There were no buildings or people, only these strange square ditches that appeared to have been scooped out of the earth. They were dragged down rather than scooped up. What exactly was happening? Azula pondered. Naruto, who was still looking at the ground, became aware of some movement. He was asked by Azula, what is it? As he began to descend, he replied, there are people down there. She questioned incredulously, are you really that big of an idiot? And you're just going to go down there? After stopping and glancing at her, Naruto said, what are you talking about? Those people are probably just survivors who need help. And you're going to help them? Did you forget that we are both wanted people? We can't expose ourselves to them. Azula glanced at the figures. Plus there's a good chance that those people aren't survivors but the culprits themselves. Well, that's even more reason to go down there. We can kick their ass and force them to bring the city back. Naruto began to descend again, his eyes widening because he hadn't considered that. Azula didn't scream at him, will you just wait a moment? Only because Naruto was holding her while they were so high. Naruto moaned but complied. Just what do you think you are going to be able to do for them? Or if they are the ones responsible for this? You don't have any reason to get involved. You're not from this town, or from this nation, you're not even from this era. Naruto sighed. And I don't want to risk the chance of running into Zuko's soldiers. You didn't make any friends from here, so you didn't lose anybody. You have no connections to that town, which means you have no reason to fight for it. Doing so is pointless. Remember, you are here on a mission, you don't have time to waste. Well, actually I did lose something. Azula gave him a suspicious look. Looking down at the people, Naruto remarked, all of my stuff from my time. I don't think it's wise to leave that stuff just lying around. He smiled and added, and besides, I've never been the type of person who can ignore people who are in trouble. And unlike me, you do have connections here. You are these people's princess, so isn't like your duty to help them in their time of need? He tried to use her reasoning against her, but Azula laughed and said, like I would go out of my way to help people who wouldn't think twice about turning me in for a reward. After a moment, Naruto remarked, well, when you say it like that, I guess it makes sense. I understand. A ball of glowing blue light formed above one of his arms, which he pulled out from under her and held out palm up. He allowed it to fall below them, where it gathered into a sizable square. He set Azula down after landing on it and said, you can stay here while I go down. Hold on. You're just going to leave me up here on this thing? Azula stomped on the platform to test its stability because she didn't like the thought of being on something that was floating in the air without any obvious means of support. Ah, you'll be fine as long as you don't try to break it. Azula angrily said, oh, that makes me feel much better. Before they could hear a rumbling sound, Naruto nearly rolled his eyes. Eyes narrowing, Naruto said, that sounds like. Azula concluded with equally narrowed eyes, earthbending. The survivors were being herded together by a number of moving clouds of dust that were circling around when they looked down. A number of men emerged from the cloud. Although Azula was unable to identify their precise features, she could identify the big round hats they were donning. She grumbled, first pirates invade our waters and now Earth Kingdom soldiers are invading our land. What the hell kind of job is that idiot Zuko doing? The citizens of the Fire Nation huddled against an earth wall as the Earth Kingdom soldiers approached them. The apparent leader inquired, are these all of the ones left? Yes, sir. They were all that we found within the perimeter. He gave them a look. A married couple with a baby, a married couple much older than the first, 2 men, one with a broken leg, 4 young children, a preteen boy, 2 teenage girls, and sisters based on their appearance. Dispose of them, he said with a sneer. Who the hell do you think you are? Huh? Snarled the man with the uninjured leg as he got to his feet. Then he threw both arms forward and hurled a fireball at the lead soldier. With a sharp thrust of his arm, the captain sent a pillar of stone crashing into the firebender's stomach, sending him hurtling back into the rock wall after raising an earth shield to block the blast. After giving a disdainful snort, the earthbending captain turned and left, saying, finish them. In order to crush the Fire Nation people, 4 earthbenders tore out a large slab of earth and threw it. Rado. Ryadoha, lightning art, lightning surge wave. The slab was blasted into debris by a lightning strike that came from the right. The soldiers were startled and turned to face the source of the lightning, but fire blasts from the left struck the 4 earthbenders. The soldiers, now officially alarmed, frantically searched the area in the hopes of spotting a group of firefighters. Dynamic entry. They turned just in time to witness a young boy kick one of their own in the face with a flying kick, sending him crashing into 2 of his fellows. The boy grinned triumphantly and said, I have been wanting to use that one for a while now. Then 2 guys were knocked unconscious when a girl wearing green goggles and older than the boys suddenly landed on top of them. Oihime. Chan. What were you doing blasting them like that? We're not trying to kill them, the child yelled. Oh, shut up, and by the way, what kind of ninja do you call yourself yelling like a maniac like that? He flushed and said, That's part of the attack. You yell out so the opponent turns around and you kick them in the face. Naruto concocted the move, but he was unaware that it was the method. It was only meant to be applied when there was just one opponent present. Despite its goofy appearance, the method was ingenious and efficient. Despite being an eccentric lunatic, Might Guy was one of Konoha's strongest shinobi for a reason. The teenagers turned to the speaking captain and said, a couple of brats trying to play hero? How surprisingly noble for children of the Fire Nation. The man spat out Fire Nation in a disgusting manner, adding, but in the end it was a completely foolish decision, kill them. Naruto and Azula turned to face the roughly 20 men who were approaching. I'm going to give you guys 20 seconds to give up and return everything back to normal before I start beating you into the ground. Naruto stated to them. They retaliated by throwing stones, which made Naruto jump and dodge until one hit his stomach, causing him to stagger back. Naruto twitched his eye and smiled darkly at the soldiers while rubbing his aching stomach. Screw 20 seconds. I'm taking you down now." With his fist cocked back for a punch, Naruto charged at a trio of men, aiming directly for the man in the center. With a sly smile, the soldier defended his position, sure that he could withstand a punch from a punk kid. Having anticipated that the man would do just that, Naruto grinned at this. Being a normal earthbender, he was prepared to withstand an attack from an adversary. Naruto flipped over the soldier just before he got to him, crouching behind him before bouncing back and punching out the man to his right. The earthbender was caught off guard and could not stop the roundhouse kick to his stomach or the subsequent uppercut. Leaping to his feet, Naruto seized the third soldier's head and slammed his face against his knee. As she reflected on their chat just moments before, Azula told herself, so he can actually fight without bending. You know, if you go down there you can't bend. Naruto scowled as he turned to face her. Why not? We are trying to lay low. Your firebending is very distinctive, so you can't use that. Airbending. Windbending is out of the question. There is only one other air windbender in the world. The avatar of this era. Naruto proposed. Well, what about energy bending? No one knows I can use that. She thought about it for a while. It's true that only she was aware of his energy bending abilities. She had never heard of energy bending before he used it on her, and she doubted that anyone even knew what it was. She also didn't know how energy bending worked or what its military uses were because she had never heard of it, and she detested it when she didn't know everything she could about a potentially helpful topic. Even though she could learn more about energy bending by watching it in action, she would prefer it to be a secret weapon so she would be the only one to see it rather than risk her brother finding out. No, it's better to keep that a secret, don't you think? She stopped. And don't lightning bend either. She clearly wanted to keep lightning bending to herself. Naruto let out a moan. There didn't seem to be any water nearby, so his only option was waterbending, which he wasn't very good at. Fine, no bending. That'll make things a bit harder, but I can still manage. There are only 20, 30 guys down there. She went on, no clones either. For a moment, Naruto appeared irritated. TCH, you're not giving me much to work with. He then gave her a startled, defiant smile. Who cares, it's actually more exciting with a handicap. She didn't anticipate that after all of those limitations, he would be so eager to fight. It was difficult to accept that Naruto had joined the cycle as an airbender given his demeanor. It was assumed that airbenders were against violence. They would rather run than fight, as Avatar Aang had shown during a number of their meetings. Like a firebender, Naruto was more combative and appeared to relish the rush of combat. Perhaps that was because Naruto was not an air nomad, despite being an airbender, and the air nomads were the pacifists. Presumably, he was a skilled killer and ninja, which would contradict everything the air nomads stood for. She let out a sigh. Fine, let's do this. Naruto held out a pair of goggles and said, here. She gave the goggles a quick glance before casting a suspicious glance at Naruto. He gave a shrug. You're the one who cares about not giving our identities away, and the sunglasses were in the room. Even though goggles weren't really her style, Azula grudgingly accepted them. Azula said, oh, and one more thing, as she put on the goggles. Don't change into a girl. As Naruto dashed at another group of soldiers, Azula turned away and concentrated on 2 earthbenders. She fired 2 orange fireballs that collided with a raised wall of earth and flew in her direction. Azula sent a vertical arc of fire at them in the same motion that she flipped it over. The earthbenders were flung back and rendered unconscious when another wall was raised, but it was insufficient to withstand the blast. A line of rock columns surged towards her and the ground rumbled. Before she threw her arm out and destroyed a stone an earthbender was about to throw at her with a bolt of flame, she leapt to the side, allowing the columns to rush past her. A second one came shortly after, striking the man in the chest and sending him to the ground, where he cried out in agony. Azula's hands blazed as she mentally vowed to make them all scream for having the audacity to invade and attack her country, taking a moment to appreciate his cries before turning away. As his men failed to defeat the young teenagers, the commanding soldier looked on in dismay and rage. He yelled at the soldiers, damn it, they're just a couple of brats. As more and more of his men were killed, a sense of dread grew within him. One teenage firebender and her younger companion were using their fists and a small blade that he had just taken out of his sleeve to pick apart a whole platoon of veteran earthbenders who had served in the war for years. Twin fountains of rock erupted from the ground surrounding Naruto and the 2 earthbenders he was battling as the earthbender captain reached out with both arms and struggled for a moment before hefting them up. Before realizing that towering waves of rock were descending to crush the earthbender, Naruto had just knocked one out with a kunai hilt to the head. He had hardly had time to yell before they were buried. The other fighters paused, their eyes wide as they took in the scene. A soldier gave the man a suspicious look. Captain? Another shakily asked. Why? They were loyal men. The captain yelled sharply, "Stop that! Remember, the moment we came to the Fire Nation we threw away our lives and the mission became everything. If we have to sacrifice a few to preserve the mission, then so be it. If you have to sacrifice yourself to keep the mission going, then do so without hesitation. Everything is for the mission." I think this guy is crazy, Azula thought. Although sacrifice was a last resort when no other choice remained and would be a fatal or crippling blow to her enemies, Azula wasn't opposed to the idea of sacrificing someone if, for example, the person was utterly incompetent or if the gain was significantly greater than the loss. He's willing to throw away everything if it means victory against his enemies, but he sounded like the kind of guy who would risk his life for a minor win. He was the kind of opponent Azula detested since he had nothing to lose and therefore nothing to be afraid of. The captain told his men, who undoubtedly believed him, the blame of their death rests on the Fire Nation, punish them for killing our comrades. Sacrifice a few to preserve the mission? Is that some kind of sick joke? When Naruto dropped the two unconscious earthbenders close to the civilians who were staring at the captain, everyone's eyes widened. It was not feasible, the captain reflected. He could not have survived that. He saw the rocks fall on top of the child. Nevertheless, he was still alive, unharmed, and had managed to save his men. He didn't know why the boy did it. What he truly wanted to know, though, was how he managed to get out of that situation and carry two grown people behind him without his knowledge. Naruto charged at the captain, shouting, "You'd rather kill your comrades than fail a mission? Is that how the Earth Kingdom works?" The captain responded by bending several spires out of the ground to slow down or strike the disguised shinobi, but Naruto moved around or leapt over them with ease as they shot upward. "As if a fire brat like you would understand," he exclaimed. Now only a few feet from the captain, Naruto yelled, "I don't want to understand," as another pillar rose up to hit him. Retorting his fist, Naruto said, "Your nakama." His fist sprang forward, colliding with the rising earth head, on and smashing it to pieces, saying, "Are worth more than some stupid mission." Before Naruto abruptly disappeared, the captain stood frozen in terror from the hot glare the fake brunette was giving him. "What in the, Naruto reappeared beneath the man, and after launching him into the air with an upper kick to his chin, he leapt up after him and appeared beneath the airborne earthbender, both of them parallel to the ground. Naruto kicked the captain hard in the right ankle, twisting his body. Naruto performed a 360-degree turn and delivered another roundhouse kick to the man's left knee, spinning the man around multiple times as the force of the kick twirled his body. Zoo. The captain spun even faster after slamming a powerful elbow into the man's ribs. He was spinning like a top after the right hook was placed on his shoulder. Naruto executed a back flip kick to the captain's chin at an angle that kept him spinning but turned his body upside down by manipulating air currents. Naruto concluded by kicking the captain's feet with an axe, sending him flying downward. Kaihan. The captain kicked up a cloud of dust and made a crater in the ground by drilling, while everyone else gaped openly, with the Earth Kingdom soldiers displaying slightly more fear in their faces than the Fire Nation citizens. Azula's raised eyebrows were the only indication that she was impressed by Naruto's attack. Naruto's henge vanished in a puff of smoke as he stumbled to his feet and then fell to one knee. A wave of pain swept through his body, and he grimaced. He now respected Lee. It was evident how resilient Lee was to open the first gate, endure this suffering, and then immediately repel an attack from Gaara. It was unfortunate that they hadn't fought yet. Perhaps they would when he returned to the village. Naruto turned to see Azula approaching him while the other soldiers whimpered on the ground behind her, drawn by the roar of flames and agonized cries. Azula stood above him, observing his appearance. He was sweating, panting heavily, and had one eye closed in agony. "You look pathetic." Naruto twitched his eye. "And you dropped your transformation, idiot." Naruto's face developed a tick mark. He said cynically, "No need to worry, I'll be fine in a minute, but thanks for the concern." Azula's eyebrow went up. "Why are you in such bad shape? He didn't hit you." Negatively, Naruto shook his head. After stating that Naruto was beginning to feel the pain subside, he thanked the spirits for his accelerated healing, which allowed him to recover in a fraction of the time that would normally be required. "No, it was my Uzumaki Naruto Renden Kaihan, Uzumaki Naruto combo. Revised edition. Using that technique puts a huge strain on my body." "Is his body under stress?" Azula scowled and turned to face the scene of the captain's crash. The dust had sufficiently settled by this point to reveal that the earthbender was buried head first with his legs protruding from the ground. Given this, Azula had to question Naruto's level of physical fitness given that he used only his physical strength to harm an adult man. Not a single component of that technique could be performed by a normal person. Rolling his shoulder, Naruto got to his feet. I know shouldn't have used that on a guy of his level, but he seriously pissed me off talking like that. Amazing. You two took out an entire army of earthbenders, exclaimed a young voice. As they turned around, Naruto and Azula saw a number of the villagers approaching, with the one who spoke, a boy a few years younger than Naruto, looking up at them with respect. Azula gave an eye roll. An army? Only about 20 guys were present. However, that didn't stop a tiny grin from appearing on her face. Naruto inquired, "Ah, are you guys okay?" The elderly man replied, a little shaken, "But physically we are fine, thanks to you." A woman bowed with a baby in her arms. "Yes, thank you very much." Given that Naruto changed forms right in front of them, Azula was a little taken aback that no one was staring at him strangely. Since it was so dark and he didn't change all that much, they most likely missed it. The elderly man looked around sorrowfully. "It's unfortunate about the city though." The earlier, defeated firebender snorted. He pushed one of the soldiers forward and asked, "What are you talking about? All we have to do is just wake them up and make them raise the city back up." Azula laughed. "That won't work." The man turned against her because he was unhappy that his idea was so readily rejected, and why not? Azula responded calmly, not at all intimidated by the man. The man looked away in embarrassment after realizing that it was true. "Well, other than the fact that they would bite their own tongues before helping us," he said. "To put it simply, they aren't the ones who did this." In response to everyone's curious looks, Azula went on to explain. She gave the unconscious earthbenders a disdainful look before continuing, saying, "I very much doubt 20 earthbenders can sink an entire city in just a matter of minutes, much less earthbenders of their level. If they had, our fight would have gone in a completely different direction. Most likely they're part of a much bigger army and they're just the cleanup crew, sent to eliminate any stragglers, like us, who got away." The townspeople were whispering among themselves after Azula gave her explanation. Some did not think she was telling the truth, while others were afraid that more Earth Kingdom soldiers would show up. Naruto started to leave. "Well, if that's true, then I'm going to go down there and making them raise the city back up," he said. Azula was quick to silence him, saying, "Forget it. We can't afford to waste any more time on a hopeless endeavor." As he walked on, the young ninja waved his hand dismissively above his head. "Don't worry, I'll have the town back up by sunrise." Azula told him, "That's in less than 6 hours." He paused and gave her a defiant look in return. He then grinned resolutely at Azula and the populace, saying, "So what? I said I would do it, so I will. I don't go back on my word, Datbeo." Azula simply let out a frustrated sigh at his actions. Then Naruto's eyes widened and he took a sharp breath. "Whoa, you were right, there's a whole bunch of them down there." "Down there?" asked Azula again. A distressed expression appeared on his face as he said, "Yeah, there is a giant cavern underneath us. That's where the army is, along with all of the buildings and townspeople. There are a lot of them, way more than those black fire guys from before. They're going around hunting for any survivors from that attack." Azula gave Naruto a suspicious narrow of the eyes. "How to know all of this?" As though that clarified everything, he said, "One of my Kage Bunshin is down there." Like all the other townspeople who had no idea what a Kage Bunshin was, Azula just stared at him. Azula became agitated and spoke up after Naruto remained silent for a few moments. "Are you going to tell me what that's supposed to mean anytime soon?" "Oh, it's just anything my clones experience while they were alive gets transferred back to me when they are dispelled." After hearing that fact, Azula looked at the blonde with interest for a while. His clones were therefore low-risk spies in addition to being an instant army. She really needed to research this ninjutsu of his. The ones she had already seen were supposedly only simple moves with hundreds of more badass techniques, as Naruto so eloquently stated, and they could be very helpful for her future endeavors. She imagined herself changing into Mai and then strolling through the palace without bothering Zuko. His face lit up when he saw her, just before she stabbed him with one of Mai's knives. His dying face had a horrified and betrayed expression on it as his beloved grinned savagely down at him. Since all of the evidence and eyewitness reports point to Mai's conviction and execution, this accomplishes two goals at once. She can ascend to the throne with little resistance because she is the sole surviving heir. Azula banished those thoughts almost instantly because she was planning too far ahead and wasn't taking into account some of the changes that had occurred. For example, some members of the Fire Nation were hostile to the royal family, and she had already fought against two groups that included members who had been high-ranking soldiers loyal to her and her father only a few months prior. Other problems with the plan included the fact that her uncle would still be eligible to be Fire Lord even if that scenario occurred, and that Avatar Aang and his friends would not let her become Fire Lord without a fight. Azula exhaled a deep, soothing breath in response to her sudden frustration before turning to face Naruto. How many of them would you say there are? As he reviewed the data from his clone, Naruto crossed his arms and squinted his eyes. Rewind. Just after the inn sank, the slowly sinking building abruptly plunged into a brief freefall and crashed to the ground, causing the Naruto clone to fall on his butt and scream. Naruto got up with a moan, rubbed his aching butt, coughed up the dust in the room, and went to the window. Even for this time of night, it was unusually dark. Fortunately, he had always had excellent vision. He wasn't sure if this was due to the Kyuubi or his Dujutsu, but he wasn't complaining. When he looked outside, he saw that most of the buildings were still standing, though some had fallen and were not able to survive the fall. However, when he looked up, he saw a stone ceiling instead of a starry sky, which confirmed that he was now trapped underground, the worst nightmare of a windbender. Ah hell. Naruto looked down to see people moving below after noticing movement on the ground. Assuming that they were merely a few of the townspeople running through the streets in a panic, the Bunshin shrugged and considered his options. He was seriously thinking of simply dispelling the rumors in order to get out of this situation and release the original figure. Naruto looked down as a man flew out of a door after hearing some shouting. When a man in armor and a wide-brimmed hat emerged from the door he had just flown from, he was unable to stand up due to stone clamps around his hands. 2 slabs of earth were raised on either side of the firebender with a gesture of the hat wearing man's arms, and Naruto flinched as he saw the man be crushed to death. 2 men ran after him, one crouching to check on him while the other raised an earth shield to block the fireballs being thrown from someone still inside the house. A few buildings to the right, another man was ejected from the door, dressed similarly to the earthbender. Before the explosion ceased and there was silence, Naruto could hear a faint yelling coming from inside the building. Naruto was certain that the spears held by the other armored men were smeared with blood. Naruto focused more on the people moving through the streets while he glared at the scene, his knuckles white from his intense grip on the windowsill. In reality, he saw groups of over a dozen soldiers approaching every building, attacking anyone they came across, and stealing anything valuable from inside what he believed to be terrified townspeople. Naruto snapped his head toward the door as he heard screams coming from outside the room. He hurried over, cautiously opened the door, and peered out without making a sound. In the hallway, green-clad soldiers were dragging people from their rooms and guiding them with spear points. As he watched this, Naruto gritted his teeth and let out a little growl. Sadly, after hearing this, one of the soldiers saw him standing in the doorway and approached him frowning. Naruto cursed as he closed the door and stepped further into the room. A few seconds later, the soldier entered, glancing around, irritated that he hadn't noticed him right away. Before realizing the window was open, he looked unsuccessfully under the beds and in any other possible hiding place for the boy. With a growl, the man peered out the window, searching for the boy but failing to see him, then turning to face the roof, which was 2 stories higher. The soldier snarled once more. He had no desire to ascend to the upper level, and since he was not an earthbender, he was also not prepared to leap from the 2nd-story window. The soldier moved away from the window and left the room, whistling innocently, looking back to see if anyone else was looking. There was no need for him to go out after the boy because he reasoned that if he jumped to the ground, one of the others would catch him, and if he climbed to the roof, either someone would see him, which was unlikely given the darkness, or he would be stuck there until they left, taking all the food and supplies with them. Even if he managed to escape capture, he would starve to death because he would have no way to get to the surface. Naruto looked around the city while hovering over it. The area surrounding the hotel appeared to be in far better shape than some other areas, where there were more buildings that had collapsed and more chaos. Buildings that were already about to collapse from the drop were falling. Fires were being started. He saw a man allow his family to flee after he tackled 2 soldiers to the ground. A boy who was only a few years older than him was pushed to the ground by a group of soldiers, who then raised and dropped a stone over his head. He witnessed a soldier run into the streets while engulfed in flames. As people attempted to flee the city, they encountered soldiers who were waiting on the outskirts of the town. He also noticed a camp with even more soldiers. The clone floated down to a building in one of the less populated areas of town, grabbed a pair of kunai from his pack, dropped his and Azula's bags on the roof, leapt down into an alley, made a clone, and instructed it to dispel itself. Damn it, if I don't do something fast these people are going to get wiped out. What? No way. Why'd I have to do that? After blinking in surprise, the first cage Bunshin glared at its copy. Because the boss needs know what's going on, idiot. The second clone shot back, sticking his finger into the first chest and saying, Then why don't you dispel yourself, Baka? The original clone slapped the other clone on the side of his head and replied, because I created you to do that, dumbass. Dispelling the clone wasn't difficult enough, and it only made him angry when he tackled the other clone and they grappled on the ground. Finish flashback. The sudden cessation of memories caused Naruto to groan in frustration. Azula asked, is it typical for clones to be so disobedient? As Naruto informed her of everything his clone had discovered, the two had moved away from the bystanders. Naruto grunted, no, as far as I've seen it's just me. The first clone, who intended to cause some disruption until the real Naruto showed up, was popped by the foolish second one. Down there, that damn clone had better be doing the same thing. After jumping into one of the square ditches where a house had once stood, Azula stomped on the ground and discovered that it was fairly sturdy. Fantastic. Her only ally was a 13-year-old half-trained avatar, and she had no way of getting down there to face a force of several hundred Earth Kingdom soldiers, at least half of whom were likely Earthbenders. She was going to fight them underground at night. She had been in worse circumstances before. She glanced at the Earthbenders who were unconscious. The captain was unassailable, but his subordinates were less committed to the mission than he was, and they might be persuaded to assist. Azula caught a glimpse of Naruto standing above the ditch. After giving it a quick glance, he said, nope, and turned to leave. Azula gave him a strange look as he went to other ditches, took a moment to consider them, and then either said, nope, or, OHED, in an intriguing way. What are you doing? Naruto replied without looking back, looking for the best spot to enter. After walking to a few more ditches, he eventually stopped. He turned to face the approaching princess and exclaimed, ah, right here. This is the tallest building still standing. How do you? Azula hesitated, blinked, and then looked intently at Naruto, raising the goggles for a better view. What's wrong with your eyes? She asked, lighting a flame to light his face so she could see the black spiral pattern instead of his usual blue orbs, but she couldn't tell because of the darkness. What is that? Naruto sheepishly rubbed his neck and said, oh, I haven't shown you this yet, have I? This is my Kekkei Genkai, the Raibigan psychic eye. Your Kekkei Genkai? My bloodline limit. Basically it's a special ability passed down by blood, Naruto clarified. And that special ability would be what? To change the appearance of your eyes, she speculated. Naruto gave a snort. No, it's the ability to channel my mind's eye through my normal eyes, which opens the door to other abilities. Like being able to see underground. The Raibigan isn't affected by things like darkness or physical barriers, Naruto stated to her. An interesting topic this may be, we'll have to get to it later, and they'd do so. Right now there's a more pressing matter at hand. Now how do you plan on getting down there? She inquired. With earthbending. The casualness of his statement caused Azula to raise an eyebrow. Regarding the earthbenders, she remarked, you sound pretty confident in your ability to get them to help us. Azula gave Naruto a perplexed look as he said, what? Those jerks? Who needs them? Well, who else do you expect to earthbend? You told me you're not an earthbender yet. Naruto gave a cunning grin. He created his trademark cross, hand seal, and said, I'm not, but I have more than a few past lives that are. A clone appeared next to him and exclaimed, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique. He told it, you know what to do. The clone greeted with a yash, and then formed a hand seal. The clone inquired, anyone in particular? Naruto tapped his chin thoughtfully, he said. With a cheeky smile that is double-mirrored, Naruto said, well, these are Earth Kingdom soldiers who are attacking the Fire Nation, so how about an Earth Kingdom avatar who loves the Fire Nation? You mean him? Oh yeah. Before going through a number of hand seals and clenching his fists, the Bunshin exclaimed, awesome. Focusing, he closed his eyes and muttered, Raipo. Shiryu no Gugen, spiritual art. Embodiment of the dead spirit. His tattoos and whiskers glowed before a cloud of dust rose and swirled around him, hiding him from view before it cleared out as quickly as it had appeared, revealing a man with green eyes and brown hair. Surprisingly, he wore a long, sleeved red shirt over dark green pants and a lighter green, dark, trimmed, sleeveless changshan. He was also shoeless. He wore a red flame headpiece on a gold chain around his neck. The man frantically glanced around. When he saw the two teenagers in front of him, he dropped into a defensive position and asked, where am I? Who are you? Unaware of what was happening, Azula watched the strange man with interest as Naruto held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. Whoa, relax Daiki. Gigi. A tick mark appeared on the head of the man who was identified as Daiki. The man shouted in Japanese, Gigi? Who the hell are you calling Gigi brat? I'm only 33. Naruto regarded the man icily. As an afterthought, he added, "And don't call me a brat," he said. "You old fart, you died when you were 33, over 1,000 years ago." "What are you talking about, you little snot? I only died 713 years ago." At that, Naruto hesitated. "Oh right, I'm 500 years in the past. But that still makes you ancient." Daiki glared at him some more and then suddenly laughed. With a curious glance at Naruto, he said, "Yeah, I guess I am ancient. So you know who I am, but I don't know you, and I still don't know where this is or..." He turned and thrust a fist out. A line of rocks rose from the ground and continued past the city edge. "How I am able to bend again." Daiki arched an eyebrow in response. "Well, I'm Avatar Naruto Uzumaki, I'm from the future," he said. Daiki blinked quickly and glanced around at the deserted piece of land. "This is where a Fire Nation town used to be until about an hour ago. And you can bend because you are possessing the body of one of my clones." Before smiling at Naruto, Daiki took a moment to examine his body. As he dropped out of his fighting stance, he said, "Cool." Naruto smiled. "This is why Daiki was one of my favorite past lives. Even though he was an Earth avatar, he had the open-mindedness of an airbender and the fierce attitude more often associated with firebenders, just like he did, and was able to make light of any circumstance." The sound of a throat being cleared caused the past and future avatars to turn to face Azula, who was frowning at them while crossing her arms and tapping her foot angrily. "Would the two of you mind speaking Mandarin?" Sheepishly, they both rubbed the back of their heads. "Sorry." Gazing at the unfamiliar man, Azula snorted and said, "So what's happening here? He doesn't seem to be just one of your clones transformed." "No, he's one of my past lives possessing my clone. It's a technique I developed to let my past lives temporarily have a physical form in this world," Naruto clarified. Daiki's bow and endearing smile caused Azula to raise an eyebrow in amusement at the unexpected display of class. "Oh, where are my manners? I'm Avatar Daiki, at your service, lady," Daiki said. "Princess. Princess Azula. The one who almost ended the Avatar cycle last spring?" Daiki asked, recognizing the name. "When did I do that?" asked Azula, her eyes widening slightly for a moment. "When you shot Avatar Aang right in the back with a lightning bolt while he was in the Avatar state." Azula said, "That would have ended the Avatar cycle?" And he nodded, saying, "Interesting." Daiki couldn't get rid of the thought that he had just said something that would come back to haunt him after seeing her face. So, the older Avatar began, shifting the topic and seeming more serious. "I'm guessing there's a reason you summoned me here." "Yeah, that town I was talking about, it was sunk by an army of earthbenders who are still underground and probably on their way to another town," Naruto clarified. Daiki assumed, trying to sound serious, but it was easy to see the arrogance in his voice. "And you want my help defeating these guys?" he told Naruto. "But, if you promise not to make a habit of it, I guess I could. You know you're not supposed to get your past lives to fight your battles. Actually, I only need you to earthbend an opening right here so that I can go down there and stop them." "So you called me here to dig a hole?" Daiki asked, feeling deflated. Naruto replied, "I haven't started earthbending yet. Don't you know how to go into the Avatar state?" Naruto was staring awkwardly at the ground. "Not in the correct way. It's only a boost of power when I use it. I know how to force myself into it, and I'm able to keep myself awareness thanks to my Raibigan, and because of that I don't get the skills and knowledge of all the past avatars part of the state, just the channeling of energy part." Daiki had to mentally concur with Azula when she said, "You are one bizarre avatar, you know that?" Unconsciously massaging his stomach, Naruto thought, "You don't know the half of it." "So where am I supposed to make this hole?" Daiki asked, clapping his hands together. "Right here." Naruto jumped into the ditch, followed by Daiki and, to his surprise, Azula. Naruto questioned her, "Wait, you're coming? I thought you were against this?" Azula scowled at him and placed her hands on her hips. "I am against this, but I'm not going to be up here by myself. Besides, there's a part of me that wants to personally crush these fools who thought they could invade my country." Naruto gave her a cunning smile. He teased, "Chan doesn't want to be alone. She's going to miss me if I'm gone." She threw a ball of fire, and he leapt away. "As if I would feel lonely. I just need to have any ally I can get, even if it's an idiot like you." "Ah, Chan's so mean." Ignoring their irate squawks, Daiki punched down, making a hole that he jumped into. "Okay, if you two are done with your little love spat," he said. "Follow me." Azula interrupted Naruto as he was about to follow him. "Shouldn't we do something about the earthbenders up here first?" I already handled them. They're not going anywhere." Azula attempted to ask, "What do you mean you handled them?" But Naruto had already leapt into the hole. Azula jumped after them, growling in frustration, and the hole closed behind her. The Earthbender captain, who was now conscious again, tried to get up nearby but was unable to do so. His body merely twitched. His immobility prevented him from seeing the markings on his comrades or the symbols dispersed throughout his body that caused this paralysis. He noticed a small child standing above his head, looking down at him with interest. After a few seconds of staring at one another, the Earthbender blinked, and the boy's cunning smile turned the captain pale. They had only needed a few earthbending thrusts before a thin layer of rock separated them from the cavern. Azula said, "It's not as deep as I thought it would be." Daiki made a hole just large enough for one person to fall through after widening the area to allow for more ground room. Fires from below gave the otherwise dark cavern a certain amount of light, which glowed dimly through the hole. Azula scowled when she noticed that there was still a significant drop to the ground as the three of them looked down the hole. Daiki said to them, "Looks pretty bad, are you sure you don't need my help?" "Thanks, but people of the past shouldn't be handling the problems of the present," Naruto replied. With a smile of amusement, Daiki questioned, "Should a kid from the future really be saying that?" Touché. As a reminder that Naruto wasn't supposed to be here, the conversation caused Daiki's smile to fade a bit. Since two avatars had never existed at the same time before, many previous avatars believed that his presence in this era might have some detrimental effects on the avatar spirit. It was unclear how this would affect the two boys. Would they share the avatar's power and their bending strength be cut in half? Or would their shifting bending be a sign of a power struggle as they battled for control of the avatar spirit both spiritually and subconsciously? These were only a few of the ideas that some of the previous avatars had. Daiki gave a mental snort. Naruto's atypically powerful bending made it clear that the former was not occurring, and there have been no indications of the latter either. Actually, Naruto has been here for about a week, and Aang was still unaware that the time traveler existed. Stupid people, doubting like that. It is understandable why they have never gained Bumi's approval. Something wrong. Daiki realized how deeply absorbed he had been in his thoughts when he blinked and saw that both teenagers were staring at him with curiosity, one more suspiciously than the other. "No, it's nothing." He waved dismissively. Azula narrowed her eyes even more as Naruto appeared not to believe him. Daiki laughed uneasily. "I should really be going now, if you don't need me for anything else." "Oh, no, we're good." Naruto uttered this statement, perplexed by the man's abrupt exit wish. "Right. Hopefully the next time you summon me it will be for a less serious situation." Without hesitation, Naruto replied, "Yeah, next time we'll spar." Someone sparring with another avatar. Ooh, sounds interesting. That was what Daiki was anticipating. "You better not die down there, kid." Before Daiki vanished in a puff of smoke and dust, the two men exchanged sly grins of challenge. "You ready to do this?" Naruto asked, smirking, as he got to his feet and turned to face Azula. He held out his hand for her to accept. With a sigh, Azula said, "Of course." She took his hand and was drawn toward him, and he put his arm around her waist before they silently leapt down the hole. As he watched the burning town from a distance, the man stroked his beard and reflected on how ironic it was that after years of these people destroying countless towns, now their towns were on fire. The fact that they were the ones who initially set fire to their own town made it even more ironic. Although he didn't believe they weren't, he said, "This is just further proves that the Fire Nation is nothing but a land of monsters who know only of destruction. And they have the gall to call the Water Tribe savages. The Fire Nation had no right to call themselves superior to the Water Tribe." One of his men complained, cough cough. "Geez, is this going to happen with every town we get?" Standing behind them, observing the burning town, he glanced down at the soldiers who had not yet noticed him. To filter the smoke filling the cavern, many of them had their shirts over their mouths. He had already sent people to create a few air holes, so he could understand the man's frustration that the smoke was starting to bother him as well. However, he was more irritated that this fire meant that more men would be killed. 570. 3 men made up their initial force. He wasn't insane enough to think that a force of that size could destroy the entire Fire Nation, but he reasoned that they would destroy at least one island using this strategy, and initially it appeared that way after defeating a number of small villages with relative ease and only losing 2 men. However, they then made the decision to target the larger cities and towns, and after only 3 towns, they were reduced to 549 soldiers, of whom only 311 men were still able to continue, while the remaining 238 were too injured to continue and had to be abandoned. After this 4th town, the number was certain to increase once more. "The problem is the general is having us make the drop too short. Too many fire bastards are surviving the fall, and worst, too many of them are in good enough condition to put up a fight," a different soldier said. He said, shocking the men, "Is that true?" I was actually considering that we should return to destroying villages for a while, you know, taking it easy a little bit while pursuing the smaller targets and giving some of those wounded men we left behind time to recover and catch up. We should use that deeper hole strategy the next time we hit a town, though, because it's not a bad one. General Fong, sir, it's just, I wasn't saying you weren't doing a good job, sir. But in the future I should hope you would be confident enough to bring up any suggestions you have for me face to face instead of uselessly speaking behind my back. Fong said in an understanding tone. At ease, soldier. There's no need to explain. Every soldier has suggestions for their superiors once in a while. He then narrowed his eyes and spoke in a harder tone. Why? Yes, sir. General, Fong said, turning to face the soldier behind him. The clean up squad hasn't returned yet after going up a while ago. You think something has happened to them? Fong scowled. It's never taken them this long before. As soon as possible, send a team up there to observe what's happening. Fong gave the order. Even if by some miracle they managed to escape not only from the island but also from the Fire Nation and return to the Earth Kingdom, they would have violated the ceasefire order and would be judged traitors, condemned to either be arrested and put to death or spend the rest of their lives as fugitives. He growled as the soldier rushed away. If someone found them and the military had been notified, it would only be a matter of time before multiple battalions came and searched the island for them, which would be the end of the mission and their lives. The clean up squad's tardiness did not necessarily indicate that the mission had been compromised. It was likely that there was simply more resistance up there than expected or that they were having fun. Neither of these scenarios was particularly good, but they were both more reassuring to consider than his earlier thoughts, so Fong shook his head of the negative thoughts racing through his mind and forced himself to relax. When Fong heard his men arguing about something, he was startled out of his reverie. What's going on? Has something taken place? Many looked back at him. You missed it? One inquired. Look what? With furrowed brows, Fong asked. Suddenly, a lot of the flames just went out. I initially thought I was seeing things, but seconds later it happened again. Fong's eyes darted to the town, scrutinizing it closely. He hadn't noticed the amount of fire, so he wasn't certain if it was less than before, so he watched to see if the phenomenon they were discussing would recur. Fong's eyes widened as he saw something happen less than 5 seconds later, not the sight of flames going out, but a flash of blue light followed by a loud crack. Was that a thunderclap? Underground? PFF'd, that isn't feasible. It is said that the most powerful firebenders are capable of generating lightning, Fong said, moving forward. No, there is one possibility. Another thunderclap sounded, and this time they could see the lightning bolts. I had thought it to be only a story, but now, one of those legendary monsters was now attacking his soldiers. Get more men down there now. This was not supposed to be occurring, damn it. These bastards are everywhere. Naruto dropped another soldier with an electrified fist before noticing a group of soldiers approaching. Rado. Shiryu, lightning art. Ground current. He placed his electrified hand flat on the ground, and a line of electricity shot forward, splitting into lines that continued to branch off until they spanned the entire width of the street and electrocuted the soldiers. Naruto turned around and sounded irritated as he noticed more soldiers approaching after observing all of the fallen soldiers strewn across the street. Aren't you dressed yet? He shouted at a structure. From inside, Azula said, Shut up, I'll be ready in a moment. I haven't got time. Really, you're not going to a ball, it's a fight, yelled Naruto as he dodged stone projectiles. Getting ready for a fight takes no more than 10 minutes. A rock whizzed inches past his face, momentarily shocking him before he frowned and kicked out a strong wave of wind that blew away the rocks and threw the soldiers off their feet. It took me that many minutes to get ready. With her bag slung over her shoulder and her clothes fully dressed, Azula said, I don't have the luxury of being able to just throw my clothes on like you. These are quality clothes. It takes time to put them on properly. After rolling his eyes, Naruto scowled at her statement. Are you implying that my clothing is of poor quality? These were. A rock struck him in the side of the head and knocked him to the ground, where he lay for a few seconds before getting up and walking back to where he had been standing before, staring at her with blood streaming down the side of his face. Given to me by a noble, so they have just as much quality as your clothes. So he's just going to ignore that happened? Azula and the soldiers both started to perspire. Naruto threw a lightning bolt that electrocuted multiple soldiers, saying, Oh, and that hurt you bastards. As Azula continued to perspire, she thought, I guess not. The earth beneath Naruto rose up and threw him into the air, and 4 earthbender soldiers moved to attack as soon as he touched the ground, but the blonde ninja ducked their attack by kicking off the air and shooting down at the earthbender's head. On Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Jutsu. Half a dozen clones appeared next to him, and they began to rapidly rotate their bodies while ejecting fire from their hands, which Azula noticed was the standard orange color instead of Naruto's usual red and black, leaving them covered in a shroud of flame. Bunshin Ryuseu. Clone Meteor Shower. Slabs of earth that resisted the suicide bombardment were quickly pulled up by the earthbenders, but Naruto swooped around and delivered a fiery fist to a soldier, sending him crashing headlong into the earth wall. The child simply multiplied. Who is he? As he watched Naruto battle the earthbenders, a soldier inquired. That kid is firebending, but he was airbending just a minute ago. Hold on a second, one man questioned aloud. You mean you only realized that now? He turned around just in time to receive a boot to the face after hearing a girl ask a question. Azula watched the man fall and turned to face the soldiers who were glaring at her. One of them drew his sword and charged at her, making Azula scoff before she kicked a burst of fire in his chest, sending him to the ground in agony. Now you've done it, girly. The other soldiers dropped into bending stances or drew their weapons when they saw her take out another man. She's a firebender, non. Benders don't engage her. On 1, the soldiers said. This time, 4 of them attacked her, with one brandishing a spear and jabbing his weapon at her stomach. Ignoring the thrust, Azula grabbed the spear by its shaft, spun around, and kicked another soldier approaching from the right in the head with a flaming roundhouse kick, then turned back to the spear and broke it over her knee. With unexpected strength, she yanked on the piece the soldier was still holding and pulled him into a vicious, fiery kick. The last guy rushed her with a loud war cry but was swiftly blasted away by a shot of fire. Azula had to duck under the swing of a sword immediately after the man dropped, danced around several more slashes, and then used one of the broken spear pieces to whack the swordsman's wrist, forcing him to drop the sword, and stabbed the other piece with the spearhead into his stomach. Then, as Azula had instructed, she rushed at 3 men, sending a blast of fire ahead of her, causing the 2 with weapons to drop back, while the 3rd unarmed soldier stepped forward and raised a wall to block the blast. She jumped up on top of the wall and flipped off and over their heads, throwing her bag into the earthbender's arms as she somersaulted over him, causing him to look at the bag perplexedly for a moment, during which Azula wasted no time in sending 2 bolts of fire that caught the 2 non-benders in the face while they were still in mid-flip. The earthbender angrily tossed the bag aside and changed his stance to attack, but was too slow and got a chest full of flames. Naruto landed next to her and blew an impressed whistle as he gazed at the fallen bodies, saying, "Wow, someone's been busy." Azula turned to shoot a wave of fire at another group of approaching soldiers, but they were beaten to the punch when a strong wind swept them aside and slammed them into a building. He pushed one of the fallen men with his foot, ignoring Azula's glare. "I guess you're not as weak as I thought. I defeated 9 guys in the time it took you to defeat 3. Third." Naruto pointed farther down the street and said, "I think you need to get your eyes checked, Chan. I took out way more than 3. Azula glanced in his direction and felt her mouth drop a little when she noticed a larger group of battered and unconscious soldiers on the ground. How did he take them all out so fast without me noticing? There are like 20 guys. Hey, these guys have passed away. Did you murder them?" He looked at her dryly and asked incredulously, "You couldn't hold back a little bit?" At worst, the blonde sounded a little irritated, but Azula observed, "You don't sound that upset." "Hey, I'm not 10 years old, and I am aware that battles like these can result in death." Naruto informed her, "Hell, I've killed before too." Really? Naruto didn't appear to have killed anyone before, he was too innocent and naive, but appearances were deceiving, and assassination was one of the perks of being a ninja. Upon realizing that hundreds of these men were still alive, Azula looked around at the bodies strewn across the streets and sighed, saying, "We can't keep this up for much longer." "What are you discussing? These guys are a lot weaker than I thought they would be," Naruto remarked, adding, "I can do this all day." "Well, be that as it may, we'll eventually lose if we continue to fight them as groups. We don't have the stamina for that," Azula said, feeling exhausted from fighting just 9 of these idiots. "Especially seeing how you were giving your opponents a second chance to attack us by not finishing them off." She resisted the urge to roll her eyes at his declaration, instead letting out a sigh. "What the heck, why don't we attack these guys all at once?" "That's a much better idea, I agree," Azula said sarcastically. "Let's get annihilated instantly instead of dragging it out." "So, what on earth ought we to be doing?" Naruto yelled, growing irritated. According to Azula, right now, nothing. With evident annoyance in his tone, Naruto echoed incredulously. "Yes, we shouldn't launch an offensive at this time. We must bide our time, stake out the situation, and wait for the right moment to strike." Naruto sagged a little and moaned. He complained, "I hate reconnaissance." Naruto's mind was suddenly filled with memories, which made him a little more alert. Before creating about 50 clones, he muttered, "Good to know that stupid clone was doing something useful." The clones nodded and went to work. "Grab all of the guys who are still alive and put them in that building. I'll seal them in there and then we can go." When Azula heard that last bit, she snapped out of her reverie and turned to face the younger boy. She had been lost in her own world, staring at the clones with a calculating eye. Go? Go where?" Naruto took out a brush, some ink, and multiple slips of paper, which he began writing on. He explained, "That clone that was down here gathered all of the survivors together and hid them in a safe place. Since we're doing reconnaissance, I say that would make a great base." At that, the princess harumphed. In addition, this might be a solution to the main problem she was facing with the entire situation. Manpower. I wouldn't call it great, but it'll do. As she considered the potential manpower, Azula didn't try to hide her disappointment. Following the soldiers' deposition in the building and the placement of those documents on each wall, which he promised would keep them imprisoned within, Naruto led her on a convoluted journey through the city, dodging Earth Kingdom soldiers and extinguishing any fires they came across until they arrived at a massive eyesore of a building that Azula knew was constructed using Naruto's peculiar woodworking technique. It was fortunate that its peculiar shape made it appear damaged from the fall. Like all the other buildings nearby, it was tall, slanted, and spiraled at the top before spreading out to resemble a blooming flower. There were more people inside than Azula had anticipated, but the majority didn't appear to be warriors, and the few that were all injured, just like everyone else in the building. Youngsters, elderly people, and those with more severe injuries were placed on mats covered with improvised bandages made from ripped clothing and rags. As the less fortunate were laid down and left to wait for the lone doctor to arrive, those who had loved ones with them were receiving care. However, with so many patients and so few supplies, all he was actually doing was patchwork. Before glancing at the blonde boy and frowning, Azula sighed, "So much for building up a force to fight with. Why haven't you changed your appearance yet?" Well," Naruto said, nervously scratching his cheek. "The thing is, my clone forgot to transform while he was in front of these people." Azula yelled, "What?" and the other people stared at her. Unconsciously, Azula repositioned the goggles on her face. Her voice became much quieter as she said, "That's still no reason why you couldn't have transformed before we came in here." Azula pinched the bridge of her nose in frustration as Naruto wept, "But they already know what I look like and I don't want to use any more chakra than I have to." Naruto knocked on the door of one of the rooms upstairs, and she followed him. A voice on the other end said, "Come in." 4 elderly people were inside the candlelit room when Naruto opened the sliding door. The first thing she noticed was a man sitting upright in a futon. He appeared to be in his early 60s, with a short beard on his chin and white hair cascading down to his neck from beneath the bandages covering his head. His right arm was also wrapped in bandages and secured in a sling. Azula assumed he was a high-ranking official, probably the mayor, based on the fact that he had his own room. Even though he wasn't the most severely injured person here, the way the other people were gathered around him, and the fine quality of his night robes, aside from the dirt, tears, and missing sleeve. And his wife was most likely the white-haired woman behind him, the only woman of the 4, dressed in equally exquisite and tattered robes. 2 men who appeared to be complete opposites sat on either side of the futon. A slender man with long white hair that reached his mid-back, a topknot on top of his head, and a small mustache sat on the left with his legs bent beneath him. He was also wearing nightgowns and a pair of round glasses with one lens cracked, being the only one with graying brown hair pulled into a ponytail and a short but thick beard along his jawline. The tanned, bulky man on the right appeared to be the youngest of the 4. Additionally, he was the only one wearing the domestic Foss's uniform rather than nightwear. The officer grunted and gave Naruto a slight frown. "HMPH, so you actually made it back. I had my doubts that you would be able to." The mayor interrupted Naruto as he scowled and opened his mouth to speak. He gave Azula a nervous look when he said, Now, be nice to our young savior. I for one am relieved to see you back safely, and I see you found your friend." He told her he knew who she was. "And he's not interested in me knowing. Because the little weasel rat most likely intends to provide Zuko with any information he can while pretending to be someone I wouldn't initially suspect." Azula grinned. It was good to see that people were still aware of her dangers. After all, the mayor was getting ahead of himself, so Azula would keep letting the idiot believe that she didn't know. The odds of him returning to the surface alive were already slim, and they only became much more so. Nevertheless, it appeared that neither of their plans would work out because the officer yelled, "Princess Azula." The man bowed before Azula, who raised an eyebrow at his apparent happiness at seeing her. The mayor turned pale, gave the man a quick glare, then turned to Azula and smiled nervously before bowing, as did his wife and the other elderly man. "Princess Azula, Forgive me, I didn't recognize you. As she removed the goggles, Azula said, "Oh please, you knew who I was the moment I walked into the room." As she moved in front of him, she saw the mayor grow even paler and stare at her in terror. "But we can worry about that later. Right now we need to focus on getting ourselves out of here and back to the surface." The mayor became more at ease after realizing he wasn't in imminent danger. "Yes, you were right, of course." The elderly man with the glasses asked in a stoic tone, "Does that mean you already have a plan to get us out of here?" The officer snapped at the man and asked, "Who do you think you're talking to?" "This is the woman who conquered Ba Sing Se with only 2 people by her side. Of course she has a plan." "Oh yeah, I've been meaning to ask you about that," Naruto replied. Azula's eyes took on a distant expression. When everything was going well for her, Ba Sing Se seemed like a very long time ago. To be honest, when I first infiltrated Ba Sing Se, my only intention was to capture the Avatar. I wasn't expecting an opportunity to take Ba Sing Se to rise. Naruto seemed unimpressed and asked, "So you're saying you got lucky?" He had hoped for a story that was more thrilling and action-packed. Azula shook her head and frowned. "But with all of this talk about my victory over Ba Sing Se and what that idea I had earlier, I might now have something. Excuse us for a moment." "No, I was lucky that an opportunity arose, but it took brain and skill to take full advantage of it and make it work in the end. But that's not what I was trying to say. What I was trying to say was that an opportunity hadn't arisen yet." She muttered, "Say, how many clones can you make?" By shrugging, Naruto said, "I don't know." He turned to face Azula, who was staring at him, and said, "A lot. A while ago in a fight I made almost 2,000 clones." 2,000? She asked, her shocked expression giving way to one of rage. "And she wouldn't have needed to come here and expose herself. Why didn't you tell me that sooner?" she hissed. "With just half of that we could have launched a successful attack earlier." "Seriously?" After shushing him, Azula answered, "Of course. A couple hundred earthbenders don't stand a chance against 1,000 avatars." Naruto lost the excited smile that was spreading across his face. "Whoa, I can't make 1,000 avatars." Azula scowled. "But you just said you can make 2,000 clones." "Okay, 1. I only did that once and it used up almost all of my chakra. And 2. I said I can make 1,000 clones, not 1,000 avatars." With a blank expression, Azula questioned, "What is that supposed to mean?" How could Naruto explain this? He sighed. "The Shadow Clone Jutsu is a technique that splits your chakra evenly among each clone. 1 clone in your energy is split in half, 10 clones in your energy is down to 1/10. Most Jonin only have enough chakra to make 10 or so clones at the most. That's why the Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, which creates many more clones, is considered a forbidden technique. It consumes a lot of chakra." Then Azula scowled. What a waste of her ability to raise an army of her own. However, Naruto succeeded in creating hundreds of clones. How much chakra did he need to accomplish that? Wait, what does this have to do with you being unable to make avatars, or whatever? Chakra isn't the only thing that's split when making clones. Kai is split too. He stated to her, "The more clones I make." Azula realized, the weaker your bending becomes. His fire was orange earlier because of this. "Okay, how many clones can you make while still being able to bend?" "I can have up to 11 clones while still being able to bend multiple elements, but any more than that and I'm down to just bending 1 element until I hit 20. 9. Then I can't bend at all." Azula nibbled on her inner cheek. Thus, it was either 30 benders or a dozen half-trained avatars, which was far short of what she had in mind. She gave a sound of irritation. What's the point of making so many clones if they can't bend or do any jutsu? Then Naruto shot back, "They can still fight." Azula laughed. "What, with close combat? They're destroyed after just 1 hit." Naruto continued, "And they can still use basic jutsu." "Basic jutsu? You mean like your henge?" Naruto gave a nod. "Yep, that and the kawarimi." Azula questioned with a faint grin on her face, "Really? That would work for her?" She turned to the other people in the room and gestured to the officer, saying, "Naruto, go back out into the city and take out as many Earth Kingdom soldiers as you can within the next hour, but bring back at least one of them along with any firebender you run across. You, go out and gather any firebender who is still able to walk and create a flame." "Right away, princess." The man bowed and left the room, his eager expression making Naruto perspire as he followed him. "A fanboy?" Naruto winced at the idea. "No, you're no longer a fanboy at that age. You're a creepy weird guy perving after a teenage girl." The mayor asked wearily but hopeful, "You have a plan?" "I do. A lot of it would rely on Naruto's skills and some excellent acting. She could force the army to surrender and bring the city back to the surface if all went according to plan. Fong rubbed his beard and paced angrily around his tent. Fong exclaimed, "What the hell is going on?" He grabbed one of the soldiers who were close after emerging from his tent. "Where is Colonel Shin? I asked for him over 20 minutes ago." "I don't know, sir. The men you sent to get him haven't come back yet." Fong gave a low growl and went back inside the tent. What a time to be without his second.in command. Nearly 4 hours have passed since he sent reinforcements into the city, and over 1/4 of the men who were expected to be down there have not returned. Fong was skeptical that they would, and many of the men who did return, particularly the earthbenders, had severe injuries. The lightning wielding firebender was still down there because none of the severely wounded squads were able to defeat him, despite numerous squads confirming his existence. Or she. The Grandmaster's identity was the subject of several different stories. Some claimed it was a woman, some claimed it was a child, and still others claimed it was a man. Whoever they were, they had left a lasting impression on the people they encountered. They were afraid of the lightning bender but also appeared to be amazed by it, and the other men were beginning to hear their tales. He sent a follow-up squad to check on the cleanup, but they haven't returned yet, as if the strong firebender wasn't bad enough. He was afraid that the worst had happened and the squad had been taken, which meant they would soon have to make a final stand. A man entered, and the flap opened. Fong turned and gave him a glare. "It's about time you got here, Shin. What took you so long?" Shin is an ordinary-looking man who lacks any distinguishing physical characteristics. Green-eyed, fair-skinned, with brown hair tied in a topknot and no facial hair, he was of average height. Not slender, but not fat either. In addition to having the most uninteresting appearance, he was also the most heartless person here. Shin was a talented swordsman who was notorious for not being kind to his adversaries. He could kill women and children without hesitation. It was most likely the primary cause of the colonel's numerous transfers. Shin was a cautious person who firmly believed that a dead enemy was an enemy who could never harm you again. It wasn't that the man was bloodthirsty. However, Shin occasionally went too far with that notion, targeting civilians as well as soldiers he believed might turn into enemies, such as wives or children who might become vindictive. This unnerved many of his former commanders and comrades. Shin bowed. "My apologies, sir. I was held up with something." "Oh?" Fong asked, and he had to clarify. Before speaking in a low voice, the colonel paused and cautiously looked around. "I believe Colonel Du has been captured." Fong demanded, "What? What are you talking about? No one can find him, and in his tent there are signs that a struggle took place. I should also report that 2 of our majors and a lieutenant are also missing." Fong swore. Naturally, this was taking place at a time when everything else was collapsing. "Tell the men to be on high alert for an intruder in the camp and order the men in the tunnel to double their efforts." A soldier, gasping for air and wearing a distressed expression, almost knocked Shin down as he turned to go. When Shin asked, "What is it?" the man in uniform wheezed. "From the town, huff, Fire Nation troops, huff, a lot of them." "What?" Fong exclaimed as he burst from the tent and rode a wave of dirt to the closest ledge that provided a view of the city. Fong had anticipated perhaps 100 soldiers when the soldier mentioned a large number of troops, but more than twice as many were approaching them, roughly equal to the number of men he still had who were fit for combat. Fong questioned, "Were they already in the city?" No, that couldn't be. They had already scouted the city and, aside from the local authorities, there had been no indication of any military presence. So how did they get so quickly down here? It didn't make sense because there were so many of them that they ought to have been noticed. Fong was too preoccupied with the advancing army to notice Shin's approach, so when he said, "What should we do, sir?" he jumped. After glancing at the Fire Nation soldiers, Fong calculated that it would take them less than 10 minutes to arrive at the camp's location. "Tell all of the men to prepare for battle and gather all of the hostages." "Hostages?" Shin quickly composed himself after Fong raised an eyebrow at him due to the surprise in his voice. Right. Because of all of our injured, our numbers are now down to being equal to a force of this size, so we'll need any advantage we can get against them." Shin began to walk away. "I'll get right on, sir." "Equal in numbers." The general's voice caused Shin to stop moving. "Did you not hear me, Colonel, when I said tell all of the men to prepare for battle?" The swordsman gave his leader a disbelieving glance. "Even the injured ones? But if you send them out to battle they will." Fong looked at Shin sharply and said, "What, die? Need I remind you that when coming here we abandoned the idea of surviving? The only value our lives have now are to keep the mission going forward. Those men serve no purpose lying in a tent, they belong on the battlefield. Do you understand?" Shin gave a stiff response and hurried off. "Yes, sir." He said softly, "Your plan better work, Chan. Come on, hurry up." let's get moving people. 7 minutes had passed, and the majority of the Earth Kingdom soldiers were frantically getting ready for combat with the Fire Nation troops that were drawing closer. Unfortunately, the process of getting ready was not going well. Because they were sleeping, the majority of the soldiers were utterly unprepared for an assault. Who, really, thinks an army from the Fire Nation will launch an underground attack? The numerous commanding officers that nobody could locate were another issue. Poor organization resulted from a lack of leadership. Many men were unsure of what to do with themselves. Some were unaware of what was happening, and some were even still asleep. A soldier kicked a man who was sleeping on the ground in his side and yelled, "Hey you, get off your ass and come on," instead. One man peered out of his tent to see the soldiers hurrying by. He called out to one, asking, "What's going on?" "You idiot, Fire Nation troops have been sighted and they'll be here any minute now." The flap opened wider, revealing 3 other men in the tent in the card game they were playing, and the man's eyes widened in shock. "What?" they asked, tossing the cards aside and hurriedly donning their armor. One soldier dragged a struggling woman along and said, "Come on, move your feet." Soldiers didn't have the heart or stomach to kill the hostages, so they took them without telling Shin. The majority of the hostages were women, some of whom were brought back by men to have their way with, while the others were older and younger. As they limped toward the front lines, a number of wounded soldiers complained, "I can't believe the general is making us fight in our condition." "I know, but the joke's on him because I'm only going as far as the back of the battalion. Far enough away from all of the heavy action but close enough for Fong to believe I'm truly participating." A sardonic glance was directed at him. "I don't get you, man. If Fong had said that you weren't allowed to fight, you would be raring to fight while claiming you could take out 50 firebenders. Hey, it's my body. Fong doesn't have the right to decide for me whether I'm good to fight or not. Actually, he does have the right, it comes with being the general. Whatever. I'm not fighting unless we're pushed back and I have no other choice, which at that point means we are doomed, but until then a fireball won't be getting within 10 meters of me." A fireball struck the ground in front of him as soon as he made that statement. After he collapsed in shock, he turned to see where it had come from, the opposite direction of the Fire Nation troops' expected arrival, and noticed more flying through the air. Fong yelled, "What the hell?" as he noticed that the flames had sufficiently brightened the area to show more soldiers, just as many as those approaching from the city's direction and much closer. These troops were now passing through the camp and pushing the slower moving ones in the direction where the others had been congregating. How did they flank us? A few meters in, they came to a halt, and then a teenage girl spoke up. "General Fong, you are outnumbered and surrounded. Surrender now or be exterminated." As he strode ahead, Fong laughed sarcastically. He halted a good distance away from the girl and said, "You say that as if you won't exterminate us anyway if we do surrender. And what is the meaning of having a kid come out and act like she's the leader? Are you insulting us?" He sent a line of earth columns hurtling toward her, asking, "You think I wouldn't strike down a child?" The girl moved her arms in wide arcs, electricity crackling off her fingertips, before a lightning bolt surged forward, meeting and disrupting his attack, unlike Fong's expectation that she would frantically jump out of the way. Seeing Fong's astonished look, she smirked and said, "I think you'll find that I'm not your average kid, General." Fong gave the girl a narrowed look. His eyes then widened in recognition as he said, "So you're the lightning bender. You are. What is the Witch of the Fire Nation doing here? Last I heard you were driven insane after your brother dethroned you and he locked you up in the madhouse." Azula arched an eyebrow at the title. Witch of the Fire Nation, not admiring it but also not detesting it. However, any hint of amusement vanished from her face when Fong brought up her humiliating loss at the hands of her brother, and was replaced by a chilly rage that she was unable to control. "You can't believe everything you hear," the rebel general said, apparently. "So your brother lied about your condition to the world. This just proves that this whole peace thing he's trying to propose is all a ploy to lure us into a false sense of security and get us while our backs are turned and our fool the king and the avatar, the naive boy that he is, fell for it." Azula laughed. "Please, you're giving Zuko too much credit. He's not that clever nor is he underhanded like that. My brother wears his heart on his sleeve. The experiences he had during his banishment made him sympathetic towards your inferior kind. As for me, yes, he tried to lock me up but I managed to escape. So make no mistake, my brother and I are enemies. The weak-minded traitor wants peace between the nations while I want to lead the Fire Nation to reign supreme." Fong stood looking at her for a moment, stroking his long beard before he spoke. "Passionate, I admit, but am I supposed to believe the words of a known manipulator?" She pointed to her much larger army that surrounded his and said, "You think I'm lying? What would be the point of that? You don't think you're getting out of this, do you?" Fong changed into a combat stance and said, "Maybe, maybe not, but we won't know unless we try." Either way, we're not giving up without a fight. From behind, someone said, actually giving up doesn't sound so bad right now. Fong spun around and gave the throng of soldiers a fierce look. Who said that? There was another who said, yeah, I'm with him. Me too. Yeah, to tell you the truth, I was never totally into the whole giving up on life thing we had going. Azula smirked at Fong as he watched in shock as more and more soldiers started to express agreement. It seems your men don't share your level of commitment. He clenched his fists in anger and snarled before hurling himself at his soldiers. What's the matter with you people? You can't just give up. Shin took a step forward. What's the point of going on? They outnumber us and a good number of us are injured. Do you really expect us to have the will to engage in a suicide battle like this when for us there's nothing at stake? If we were defending our homeland with lives of our countrymen at stake, we would fight until our last breath, but this is just us pointlessly throwing our lives away, with no honor behind our deaths. If we surrender, sure we'll live hard lives as prisoners, but we'll survive. Fong got in Shin's face by grabbing him by the collar. He pushed Shin to the ground and turned to face his other soldiers, saying, what are you going on about? No honor. Were any of you listening to me before we came here? I said if honor or glory is what you were looking for, then this isn't the place to find it. Surrender? We all know of the Fire Nation's mercy. You think they are going to live after what we have done? The men were chatting about how he was correct. What would you rather happen? Death by surrender or death in battle? They shouted, battle, as they got ready to engage in combat. After listening to their war cries for a few seconds, Azula let out a sigh. I suppose it was time for Plan B. So you aren't going to give up, huh? I noticed that you have hostages. What a coincidence that we have hostages too. She snapped her fingers, and several Earth Kingdom soldiers who were bound by their chains were brought forward. A hostage trade? Asked Fong doubtfully. Ultimately, that would only provide them with more troops to fight with right away, more troops than the civilians they had taken prisoner. Unless she had a trick in mind, it would be stupid of her to offer that. Oh please, like I would trade 70.2 soldiers for not even 20 civilians, Azula replied. Fong scowled. If anything, that increased his apprehension. She had brought those captured soldiers out for a reason, even if it wasn't to trade hostages. One of his majors, a soldier, stepped forward and said in a low voice, General Fong, sir. She isn't telling the truth. It's impossible for her to have 70.2 of our men. Fong asked, what do you mean? Why is that impossible? Because 83 of the men came back, so? We only sent 114 into the city. Before he narrowed his eyes at the princess, the general only needed a moment to calculate the problem. What are you playing at? Azula pretended to be innocent as she asked, what do you mean? I mean you are lying about the number of my men you have up there. There's no way you can have 70.2, Fong replied. Fong became tense when she asked, and why is that? Because that's 40.1 more men than there should be. How do you know that? Azula tapped her chin as though she was thinking, how'd I know? Her gaze strayed to his soldiers for a moment before she said, I wonder. Fong's all ready. Squinty eyes widened in shock. What did you do? Who knows? Did I lie about how many men I captured to make your loss seem bigger and psych you out? She sighed. Her smile made his hair stand on end. Maybe. Or did I really capture 70.2 of your men and send 40.1 of mine to infiltrate your camp? She asked. More than likely. Fong glared at the men behind him, who were examining one another with suspicion, fear, or animosity. You're lying. Fong cried out in a nearly desperate tone. Azula sighed in frustration. Why would I lie? In response, the general asked, why would you tell us? Why not have them strike while we were still unsuspecting? Azula paused to allow the scenario to play in his mind, relishing the fear that was building on Fong's pale face before continuing, saying, you may know that they're there, but that doesn't help if you can't pick them out. If I give the signal, I'm sure each of my men can take out at least 2 of yours before they are stopped, and I don't need to tell you how huge of a blow would be to you. But the thing is, I don't need them to defeat you, Fong. Even if they hadn't infiltrated, my force would still be superior to yours. Like your second.in. Command said, you're surrounded and outnumbered, many of your number are injured. But if that wasn't bad enough, now your troops are in disharmony. They don't trust each other. They're weak and I can easily destroy the lot of you. But I don't want to. She continued, perplexing him. I'm giving you a chance to get out of this alive. Just surrender and raise the town back to the surface and I'll let you leave the Fire Nation with your lives. Fong's terrified features turned stony as he looked directly at her, which was unexpected because Azula had expected the general to spend several desperate moments pitifully trying, and failing, to think of some other way out of this before giving in to his desire to live. Well, if those are our options, then I choose to fight. Azula clenched her jaw at his intransigence. Why are you so quick to choose death? Either option we choose means death for us. Fong stated. We came to the Fire Nation against the Earth King's order. If we were to go back home we would be executed for treason. Azula scowled. That fact had escaped her notice. The general slipped into a bending stance and said, if we are going to die then I'll do it while going about on our mission, and taking out the infamous witch of the Fire Nation definitely falls into that category. I would rather die as the general who exposed the Fire Nation's grand farce than run away and be the insane traitor who was executed after failing to prove his insane conspiracy, only for the Earth Kingdom to fall because his conspiracy was actually in fact true, he said passionately. Azula crossed her arms and gave Earthbender a nearly amused look. Our grand farce? You mean that thing you were going on about how this peace offering is just a trap to strike you while your guard is lowered? What does your mission have anything to do with that? Since we couldn't convince Earth King Kui to back out of this treaty, we decided to get Fire Lord Zuko to do it. We're going to deal a blow against the Fire Nation too large for your nation to ignore that will provoke you guys into attacking us before we stupidly let you in even more. Azula concluded that the man was insane. It seems that she wasn't the only one who asked, are you insane? Shin glared at the men who were meant to be his allies, and all eyes were on him. That's your big plan? For the first time in 100 years your home is experiencing peace and you want to ruin that by starting another war? How the hell does that save anyone? You're endangering your people's lives. You try to make it seem like you are the only ones who are going to get hurt by your actions, but what about the soldiers who will lose their lives fighting your war? The people who will get harmed during your war? The families who will be affected by your war? What about them? Azula fought back her astonishment. Despite being unanticipated and unplanned, his outburst appeared to be the last straw that caused the Earth Kingdom soldiers to lose their will to fight. In fact, they appear embarrassed. Who would have guessed that Hothead could make such an impactful speaker? In order to avoid falling into the sinkhole that appeared beneath him, Shin, or rather, the fake Shin, had to hop sideways. His hand was still outstretched from the attack as he glared up at Fong, who was glaring back. Before turning to face Azula and resuming his battle stance, the bearded man sneered at him and said, I can't believe that you of all people are backing down from this. I guess even the most ruthless of men can turn cowardly. The sound of weapons clattering on the ground interrupted Fong, who said, if you're not going to help us then at least shut up and get out of our way. I have no need for. When he looked back, he saw that his men had lost all will to fight and were dropping out of fighting stances and throwing down their weapons. He yelled, cowards, at them. You're all cowards. With first-hand knowledge of what that meant, Azula said, give it up, Fong. You no longer have the support of your men, you're alone. You lose. You can't hope to put even a dent in our forces. Fong growled and bared his teeth. He pulled up a big boulder and threw it forward, then rushed forward in its wake, saying, I don't need to defeat your army, I only need to kill you. After that I don't care what happens to me. The men surrounding her were compelled to disperse as Azula rolled beneath it, and she resurfaced with a burst of fire from both fingers. Fong cocked his head, feeling the searing heat brush past his cheek as the blast barely missed his face. 2 head-sized stones were stomped up into each hand and thrown at her one after the other by Fong. However, a wave of fire, followed by another horizontal wave, knocked both of them back. In order to launch himself over the flames and land behind Azula, Fong bent a pillar of earth. This caused a wave of earth to shoot outward, but she also used her bending to get ahead of the attack. One of the masked soldiers beside the head officer scoffingly remarked, oh man, they're both so even. The masked soldier asked the man to watch the fight more closely so he could see what he was talking about. Even? What fight are you watching? This is going to be over in a minute. Azula fired multiple blasts at the general while she was still in the air. Fong created a barrier that resisted the attack until he broke it into multiple pieces, which he intended to throw at the firebender, but discovered she was no longer in the air. He glanced around and saw her to the right as she completed the lightning technique. Fong quickly gathered the rocks into a wall, but the lightning blast was too strong for the loose rock shield, and Fong was blown back, landing on the ground a few times. Fong moaned as he struggled to stand up, but a foot flipped him onto his back and then stomped on his chest, while 2 fingers blazed a tiny flame a few inches from his face. Fong looked up from the hand to the face, gulping in anxiety. Azula commanded, yield. On the surface, Yi, the man without a broken leg, sat in front of a campfire and gazed around with a bored expression. A few hours have passed since the girl and the strange boy went underground to retrieve the city, which he believed was an impossible task. The survivors have since relocated to the nearby forest, taking the motionless earthbenders with them. The elderly man who hadn't been engaging company was the only one awake except for him. The elderly man said, The sun is going to rise pretty soon. Yi turned to face the horizon. Yeah, you're right, it'll probably be just another few minutes. The elderly man glanced in the direction of the former city. I wonder if those kids are alright. I doubt it, Yi said to himself before he spoke. Who knows, but it looks like that kid's not going to make his deadline. The elderly man laughed. Don't count him just yet, he still has a few minutes left. The two Fire Nation men looked at the Earthbender captain, who sounded a barking laugh to indicate that he was awake. A blizzard would roll in before your city will get razed. Yi threw a rock at his head and said, shut up. He was not allowed to express his agreement with the soldier aloud, even if he did. The three men were startled, and everyone else was awakened, when the ground began to rumble and shake. As the sun began to peak over the horizon, they looked toward the city and saw buildings rise out of the earth. The city. Yi stared at it in shock as the other citizens hurried into the unearthed city. I don't believe it. They actually did it. Impossible, said the captain of the Earthbender. They couldn't have beaten General Fong and the others. As the Earthbender left in the direction of the city, Yi chuckled at him. 2 kids beat an entire army of you guys. No wonder we were kicking your ass during the war. Although all of the buildings were present, they were all rather damaged. Some had even fallen apart entirely. Restoring the city to its former splendor would require a great deal of effort and time. The old man had lived in this town for more than 60 years, and the only building that was undamaged was an odd-looking one that didn't resemble anything he had ever seen. The door opened as he and his spouse gazed at it, and a man peered out, squinting in the sunlight. Then a smile appeared on his face and he stepped out completely. It's the sun, we're above ground again. As more people with joyful faces poured out of the building to celebrate being in the sun once more, cheers sounded from inside. The other survivors hurried over to reunite with their estranged family and friends after hearing the commotion. A big hole appeared, and the ground rumbled once more, but not as much as before. The head officer and Azula, the mayor with his wife's support, left with the soldiers from Earth Kingdom and Fire Nation. With 3 Earth Kingdom soldiers in the center and 4 Fire Nation soldiers outside, 2 on each side, they formed a line several people wide. If one were to look closely, they would see that the armored soldiers didn't look right, the color wasn't right, and the masks and helmets weren't exactly right. It was now clear that some of the Fire Nation soldiers weren't wearing real armor but rather makeshift armor made of scrap iron. As they were led through the city with many interested onlookers following, Fong was up front, chained, until they came to a halt at a clearing on the city's edge. Azula glanced around, taking in the surroundings. With the exception of an unrestrained Shin, which Fong saw and scowled at, the Earth Kingdom soldiers were repositioned to the center of the clearing after she said, "This will do." "I don't understand, Shin. You didn't have any objections to the plan at first. You helped come up with it even. What happened between then and now that changed your mind?" Shin gave a headshake. As he watched more Earth Kingdom soldiers being led into the clearing, he remarked, "Nothing happened." He pointed to 2 soldiers carrying another unconscious Shin and said, "Because I doubt Shin changed his mind." Fong and his men were so shocked that they could only wildly turn their heads back and forth between the 2 in confusion and alarm. He exclaimed, "What sorcery is this?" The general's jaw nearly fell out of joint when the conscious Shin transformed into the smaller and younger Naruto in a puff of smoke. Not sorcery, ninjutsu. The henge, transformation jutsu. As they also dropped their henge, nearly every Fire Nation soldier and numerous Earth Kingdom men exposed themselves as clones. With the exception of Fong, who appeared indignant, everyone, including the Earth Kingdom soldiers, gazed in awe at all of the clones. "You tricked us, you. What the hell are you?" "Me? I'm the Avatar and a shinobi." "Avatar? The Avatar?" Fong erupted at the young boy as Naruto nodded. "What is that? I know the Avatar. I've met him before. You don't even look anything like an air nomad." Sheepishly, Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. After pausing, he added, almost to himself, "I would bend 2 elements to prove I'm not lying, but with all of these clones out I can't bend anything right now. Though I do have to dispel them anyway to do this next part, so." He began creating hand seals after driving out all the clones. With a loud cry, Fong rushed towards the blonde ninja, taking advantage of the fact that all of the clones had vanished to launch an attack. As he held the last hand seal, Naruto thought, "This had better work for once." Mokuton. Renshoro no Jutsu. Wood release. Serial pillar prison technique. A beam of wood erupted from the ground in front of the charging Fong, knocking him back. Numerous others followed, forming cages around the green-clad soldiers. By adding more chakra, Naruto created more wood beams beneath the cages, which caused them to rise higher in the air and distance the earth benders from their element. Naruto wiped the perspiration from his face and inhaled deeply several times, It was understandable that he was nearly depleted of chakra after creating so many clones that also kept a henge for several hours and then building all of these prisons. Two actions that would have taken a significant toll on even his enormous chakra reserves. Speaking of cages, Naruto's perspiration fell as he observed the variously shaped prisons. They came in a variety of shapes, including pyramids, domes, circles, and even some spiraling cones. Naruto twitched his eye and said, "Not one of them is box-shaped. Oh well, at least it got the job done." Naruto lifted one hand and created a tornado over it as he floated up to where Fong was being held. "Windbending," he said, lighting a tiny flame with his other hand. "And firebending. Who else besides the Avatar can do that?" Naruto stopped Fong's bending, then floated back down and began to walk away as Fong gaped at the two elements in his hands. Fong called out to him, Who are you?" Without halting his pace, Naruto glanced back over his shoulder. He smirked as he declared, "I'm Naruto Uzumaki, the Crimson Avatar. The Avatar from the future. Remember it." As he passed, Azula whispered, "I still say we should kill them." Rolling his eyes and letting out a sigh, Naruto said, "We won. Give it a break already. Besides, we can't kill 300 guys just like that." Azula followed him and said, "Sure we can. It would be simple. You have them trapped in wooden prisons. A few small flames would be all it would take to turn them all into charred corpses." What the hell? Expression came back to Naruto as he paused. "What?" she asked without knowing. When the two teenagers, mostly Azula, decided it was time to depart, the sun was much higher in the sky after they had spent the time being fed, getting a lot of gratitude, and getting some much-needed rest. With Naruto, his advisor, and the chief officer standing beside him, and the majority of the town's residents gathered even farther behind them, the mayor declared, "We owe you a great debt, Avatar." He bowed, and the two men behind him swiftly followed suit. "Thank you. Without you, our buildings would still be buried and our people dead." Naruto grinned. He turned back to face the girl who was waiting for him impatiently, leaning against a building and tapping her foot. "Well, I can't take all of the credit. Most of the thanks should go to Haim-chan. The truth was, I don't know what I would have done if she hadn't come up with that plan. He had a goal when he went down there, but he had no idea how he was going to get there. He thought it was incredible that Azula could bluff them into such a surrender. He was starting to understand how she had taken over a kingdom with only a handful of people in her midst. She turned away and rolled her eyes at the smile he gave her. She hoped he would just remember they were wanted and move quickly. She turned to face a number of children who waved and grinned at her. Honestly, what is there for them to talk about? All these people have been doing is thanking us. I'm sure they've gone through every form of gratitude possible. Unaware that a tiny smile had formed on her lips, the princess snorted and turned away. "What is this? You first make a special effort to save a few peasants." "Oh great," Azula said, turning her head and squinting at her father's frowning face in a nearby window. "And you're feeling good now because of these small acts of gratitude from people who ought to bow down to you and express gratitude for simply being there." She hissed, "I am not feeling good," and then paused. "Well, I am, but not because of them." Accordingly, Ozai concluded that you had defeated those soldiers. "You did well, I admit. But Princess Azula, putting your life in danger just to save these people?" Ozai gave a disheartening shake of his head. "That is not what you were taught." "It wasn't like that. I just felt it would be better to take care of this problem now before it became any worse later." Ozai roared. "Lying when things become challenging, how normal of you." Azula gave him a scowl. "What do you know? You're not even real." "I am aware that the boy persuaded you to go down there." Ozai shot back, causing her to wince. "When did you lose the strength to allow a fool to control you?" Azula's face contorted in rage as she turned on him. When Azula realized she was no longer truly alone, she interrupted, saying, "I'm not being manipulated. I'm just going along with what he wants until." Beside her, Naruto stood with his face against the glass, looking inquisitively. He inquired, "Who are you talking to?" Azula shook her head after glancing back at the window, where her father was no longer visible. "Nobody. Are you finished here?" Yeah but..." As she stalked down the road, she said sharply, "Then let's go already." After blinking, Naruto looked through the window one more time, shrugged when he saw nothing, and then jogged ahead of his traveling companion. Azula observed him tossing a final wave to the villagers over his shoulder. "Until I get a chance to take control, I'm just doing what he wants, and once I do, I'll be the one in charge."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.